My parents handed my sister a cruise ticket worth $13,000 and tossed me a $2 lottery ticket with a smirk. They told me to buy some hope. Well, I did. I won $999 million. When they found out the truth, I had 79 missed calls on my phone. Before I tell you how I bought their debt and evicted them from the house I paid for, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been the black sheep who became the wolf. I am Gabrielle Winters, 30 years old, and for as long as I can remember, I have been the invisible infrastructure of my family. I am a corporate crisis manager in Atlanta, which means when CEOs of Fortune 500 companies make a mess, I am the one they call to clean it up in the shadows. But to my parents, Harold and Joyce, and my sister Candace, I am just a glorified secretary. On Thanksgiving morning, I pulled my sedan into the driveway of the colonial-style mansion my parents lived in. A house I had secretly refinanced 3 years ago when my father made a bad investment to save them from foreclosure, though they never knew it was me. I took a deep breath, checking my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked sharp in my tailored blazer, but I knew the moment I stepped through those double oak doors, I would be reduced to nothing more than the help. I grabbed the bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon from the passenger seat. It was a vintage bottle worth $200, chosen specifically because I knew my father appreciated red wine. I walked up the stone path, bracing myself. The door swung open before I could even knock. My mother stood there looking impeccable in her cream-colored silk blouse and pearls. She did not smile. She looked at her watch and then at me. "You are late, Gabrielle," she said, stepping back to let me in but offering no hug. "The turkey needs basting and the catering staff canceled, so I need you in the kitchen immediately." I held out the wine bottle. "Happy Thanksgiving, Mom." "I brought this for Dad." She barely glanced at it before waving her hand dismissively. "Just put it on the side counter with the other drinks." "We already opened the wine Preston brought. He has such exquisite taste. Yours looks like something you picked up at a gas station on the way here." I felt the familiar sting in my chest, but I swallowed it down. I walked into the kitchen, placing my $200 bottle next to a generic box of wine. The kitchen was chaotic, filled with the smell of roasting sage and burnt sugar. My mother was already behind me, holding out a stained floral apron. "Put this on," she ordered. "Preston likes his turkey glazed every 20 minutes, and Candace is busy getting dressed. She cannot risk getting grease on her silk dress." I took the apron. It was the same one I had worn every holiday for 15 years. While Candace played dress-up, I played servant. As I tied the strings around my waist, I heard raucous laughter coming from the living room. The TV was blasting a football game. I could hear my father cheering and the distinct booming voice of my brother-in-law, Preston. I got to work. I was chopping vegetables with the precision of a surgeon when the kitchen door swung open. Preston strolled in holding a crystal goblet filled with red wine. My wine. He had opened my bottle, but I knew he would claim credit for it. He leaned against the marble island watching me work. He was a tall white man with the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no in his life. He worked in tech sales, always using buzzwords like synergy and leverage, but I knew from my industry contacts that he had not hit a sales quota in 2 years. "Looking good, Gabby," he said, taking a sip of the wine. "You really have a knack for this domestic stuff. It is amazing to watch. You people just have this natural rhythm in the kitchen, do you not? It is like it is in your blood." I stopped chopping. The knife hovered over a carrot. My grip tightened on the handle. It was a microaggression so casual and so practiced, he probably did not even register it as an insult. I turned to look at him, keeping my face completely neutral. "I believe that is called culinary skill, Preston," I said, my voice even. "It comes from practice, not genetics." He laughed a deep belly laugh that echoed in the high ceilings. "You are always so serious, Gabby. Lighten up. I was giving you a compliment. Most women these days do not know how to serve a man properly. Candace certainly does not, but that is why she is the trophy and you are the engine, right? Every team need players who do the grunt work. He winked at me and refilled his glass before sauntering back to the living room to join my father. I stood there for a moment listening to the silence of the kitchen, the engine, the grunt work. I looked down at my hands. These hands had signed contracts that saved companies from bankruptcy. These hands managed millions of dollars in assets. But in this house, these hands were only good for basting a turkey for a man who saw me as nothing more than a stereotype. By the time dinner was served, my feet were aching. I carried the heavy platter of turkey into the dining room. The table was set beautifully with the family's best china and silver. My mother had arranged the seating cards. At the head of the table sat my father. To his right was Preston. To his left was Candace, looking radiant in a shimmering gold dress that cost more than my first car. Next to Preston sat my mother. I looked for my place card. It was not at the main table. It was set at a small folding card table pushed into the corner near the kitchen door. The kind of table you set up for children. But there were no children here today. Just me. Mom, I said, pointing to the folding table. Really? My mother fussed with her napkin, not making eye contact. Oh, stop making a scene, Gabrielle. The main table only seats 6 comfortably, and we wanted to give Preston plenty of elbow room. He has broad shoulders. Besides, you will be up and down fetching things anyway, so it is more convenient for you to be near the kitchen. I looked at my father, hoping for some defense. He was busy pouring gravy for Preston. Sit down. Gabriel, let us not let the food get cold, he muttered. I sat at the folding table. While they had the heavy silver forks passed down from my grandmother, my place setting had the mismatched stainless steel cutlery we used for camping. I cut into my turkey, silently watching them from my exile in the corner. It felt less like a family dinner, and more like I was watching a play I had not been cast in. So Preston, my father, boomed his voice full of admiration. Tell us more about this big deal you are closing. It sounds monumental. Preston wiped his mouth with a linen napkin and leaned back, expansive and arrogant. Oh, it is huge, Harold. Massive. We are leveraging blockchain technology to disrupt the supply chain logistics. I cannot give too many details because of the non-disclosure agreements, but let us just say the commission check alone will put me in a different tax bracket. We are talking 7 figures. Candace squealed, clapping her hands. My husband, the genius. I have already picked out a new Mercedes. I think I deserve it for supporting him through the stress. Do you not think, Mom? Absolutely. My mother beamed. Behind every great man is a woman who keeps him inspired. You two are a power couple. I took a sip of water, trying to wash down the dry turkey. I knew for a fact Preston was lying. My firm had consulted for the very company he claimed to work for. They had downsized their sales department 3 months ago. Preston was not closing deals. He was unemployed. But I said nothing. Not yet. I decided to test the waters. Actually, I have some news too, I said, raising my voice slightly to bridge the gap between the kids' table and the main stage. I just secured a partnership with the Sterling Group. I will be leading their crisis management division for the entire Southeast region. It comes with a significant salary increase and equity in the firm. The table went silent for a split second. Then my father waved his fork in the air without even looking at me. That is nice, Gabrielle. More paperwork, I assume. You always did like filing and organizing. Just make sure you do not work too hard. You are looking a bit tired around the eyes. A woman needs to prioritize her appearance if she wants to attract a suitor. But Dad, it is not paperwork, I tried to clarify. It is strategic consulting. I manage. Preston interrupted me, loud and boisterous. Strategy is a strong word, Gabby. Let us be real. You are a glorified assistant, and there is nothing wrong with that. The world needs secretaries. But let us not bore everyone with administrative details when we are celebrating real entrepreneurship here. He raised his glass. To success. And to knowing your place in the food chain. My family clinked glasses, laughing as if he had told the wittiest joke in the world. I sat there, my hand gripping the cold steel of my cheap fork. Knowing your place. Yes, Preston. I knew my place. I was the one observing. I was the one remembering. And I was the one who knew that the food chain was about to flip upside down. I took a bite of the turkey I had cooked and smiled a smile that did not reach my eyes. Enjoy the meal, I thought. It is going to be the last one you digest peacefully. The transition from dinner to the gift exchange was always the most theatrical part of our family gatherings. My father Harold liked to think of himself as a generous patriarch, the kind of man who bestowed blessings upon his children like a king granting titles. But in the Winters household, generosity was never free. It was a currency used to purchase loyalty and reinforce the hierarchy. I sat at my small folding table in the corner, watching as my mother cleared the dessert plates. The air was thick with the scent of cinnamon and expensive cologne. Preston was leaning back in his chair picking his teeth with a toothpick while my sister Candace applied a fresh coat of lip gloss, using her phone as a mirror. My father stood up, tapping his crystal glass with a silver spoon. The sharp dinging sound silenced the room. He cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. He looked at Preston and Candace with a warmth that never seemed to extend to me. Another year has passed, he began, his voice booming with pride. And what a year it has been. We have watched you two build a life that is the envy of everyone at the country club. Preston, your business acumen continues to astound me. And Candace, you have turned that house into a home worthy of a magazine spread. I took a sip of water to wash down the bitterness rising in my throat. Preston had not closed a deal in 6 months, and Candace had not lifted a finger to decorate that house. She had hired an interior designer and claimed the credit. But facts did not matter in this room. Only the narrative mattered. My mother stepped forward, holding a heavy gold envelope. It was made of thick cardstock and shimmered under the chandelier light. She looked at it with reverence, as if she were holding a holy relic. "We know how hard you have both been working," my mother said, her voice trembling with emotion. "We know the stress of maintaining such a high standard of living, and we decided that you deserve a break. A real break. We dipped into our retirement savings a little bit, but seeing you happy is worth every penny." She handed the gold envelope to Candace. My sister grabbed it, her manicured nails tearing through the expensive paper. She pulled out a glossy brochure and a set of tickets. For a second, there was silence. Then Candace screamed. It was a high-pitched sound that pierced my eardrums. "Oh my God, Preston, look!" she shrieked, jumping up and down. Royal Caribbean, the icon of the seas, the owner's suite. Preston snatched the brochure from her hands, his eyes widening. "Are you serious, Harold? This is the 2-week itinerary through the Mediterranean. This suite alone goes for $13,000. My father beamed, puffing out his chest. "Only the best for you, son. It includes a private butler, unlimited dining at the specialty restaurants, and a premium beverage package. We did not want you to worry about a single bill while you are out there conquering the world." Candace threw her arms around my father's neck, weeping theatrical tears. "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you, Mommy. This is exactly what we needed. I was just telling Preston how exhausted I am from planning all these charity galas. We need to recharge." Preston shook my father's hand vigorously, pulling him into a man hug. "You are too generous, Harold. Really. This is grand. I promise when my commission check clears next month, I am taking us all out for the finest steak dinner in Atlanta. But until then, thank you." I watched them. The 4 of them stood in a tight circle of wealth and delusion, hugging and swaying. They looked like a perfect portrait of success. The $13,000 vacation, the retirement money burned in seconds for a couple that was already drowning in secret debt. I felt invisible. I felt like a piece of furniture in the corner of the room. I wondered if they had forgotten I was there. I began to quietly fold my napkin, preparing to slip out the back door while they were distracted. But then my father turned. His smile faded slightly as his eyes landed on me. The warmth drained from his face, replaced by a look of obligatory charity. "Oh, and Gabrielle," he said, his tone dropping an octave, "we did not forget you." Not. He reached into his breast pocket. He did not have a gold envelope for me. He did not have a speech about my accomplishments or my hard work. He pulled out a thin, white envelope. It was standard letter size, the kind you get bills in. It was already slightly crumpled at the corner. He did not walk over to hand it to me. He tossed it across the mahogany dining table. It slid over the polished wood, spinning slightly before coming to a stop near the edge. It did not even reach my folding table. I had to stand up and walk over to the main table to retrieve it. "Go on, open it," my mother said, her voice devoid of the excitement she had shown Candace. "We know it is not a cruise, but we wanted to give you something practical, something that represents hope." I picked up the envelope. It felt light, empty. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the contents. There was a cheap greeting card with a generic picture of a turkey on it. Inside was a single slip of thermal paper, pink and white numbers printed in a dot matrix font, a lottery ticket, a Powerball quick pick. I stared at it. $2. They had spent $13,000 on my sister, and they had stopped at a gas station convenience store to buy me a $2 ticket. "It is for tonight's drawing," my father said, pouring himself more wine. "The jackpot is nearly $1 billion. We figured since you are always struggling with your little job, maybe you will get lucky. Maybe fate will finally smile on you, Gabrielle, because God knows you need a break." Candace leaned over, looking at the ticket in my hand, and giggled. "A lottery ticket? That is actually really cute, Dad. It is like a little game for her. Imagine if she actually won. She could finally buy a wardrobe that does not look like it came from a clearance rack." That is when Preston chimed in. He swirled his glass of scotch, leaning back with that arrogant smirk that made my stomach turn. He looked me up and down, his eyes filled with mock pity. "Careful there, Gabby," he drawled. "Do not spend that money in your head just yet. You know the odds of winning the Powerball, right? It is something like 1 in 300 million. He paused for effect, waiting for the room to focus on him. "Honestly, Gabby, looking at your track record, those odds are still better than you finding a husband before you turn 40. Winning $1 billion is hard, but finding a man who wants to settle down with a workaholic spinster, now that is statistically impossible." The room erupted. My father threw his head back, laughing so hard he started coughing. My mother covered her mouth, trying to hide her amusement, but her eyes were crinkling with delight. Candace slapped Preston on the arm playfully. "Oh my God, Preston, stop, you are so bad. Do not be mean to her." But she was laughing too. They were all laughing. They were laughing at my loneliness. They were laughing at my career, which they saw as insignificant. They were laughing at the $2 insult they had just handed me. I stood there holding the slip of paper. The sound of their laughter felt like physical blows. My face burned. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the ticket up and throw it in their faces. I wanted to tell them that I had more money in my investment portfolio than all of them combined. I wanted to tell Preston that I knew he was broke, but I did not. I was a crisis manager. I knew that when the building is burning, you do not fan the flames, you locate the exit, and you secure the assets. I looked down at the ticket. 1 in 300 million. Preston was right about the odds, but he was wrong about the player. I forced the muscles in my face to relax. I smoothed out the corners of the crumpled ticket. I looked up at them, my expression completely unreadable. The laughter died down slowly, replaced by an uncomfortable silence as they waited for me to react. They wanted me to cry. They wanted me to storm out so they could call me dramatic. They wanted me to be the victim. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you, Dad," I said, my voice steady and cold as ice. I tucked the ticket into the pocket of my blazer. I patted it gently. Preston is right. The odds are astronomical. But someone has to win, eventually, right? I will treasure this. You have no idea how much I will treasure this. I picked up my purse and the empty casserole dish I had brought. "Enjoy the cruise," I said, turning my back on them. "I hope it is everything you deserve." As I walked out the front door, I heard Preston mutter behind me. "She is so weird. No sense of humor at all. $2 is probably more than she makes in an hour anyway." I closed the heavy oak door behind me, shutting out their voices. I walked to my car under the cold November sky. I did not know it yet, but the piece of paper in my pocket was not just a ticket. It was a receipt. A receipt for every insult, every overlooked moment, and every cruelty, and I was about to cash it in. The drive back to my apartment was a blur of red taillights and hollow silence. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white, mimicking the color of the envelope still sitting in my pocket. I did not cry. I had trained myself a long time ago not to cry over my family. Crying implied that I expected better from them, and I had stopped expecting anything from Harold and Joyce Winters years ago. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. It was a modest building in a quiet, respectable part of town. Not the gated community my parents lived in, and certainly not the sprawling estate Candace had just moved into, but it was mine. I paid the rent. I paid the utilities. And most importantly, no one inside those walls ever told me I was not good enough. I unlocked my door and stepped into the cool darkness of my sanctuary. I kicked off my heels, letting out a long breath that shuddered in my chest. I tossed my keys on the granite counter of my kitchen island. The white envelope fell out of my pocket and landed next to them. The cheap paper looked even more pathetic against the clean, modern lines of my kitchen. I reached for it, intending to throw it in the recycling bin. It was trash. It was a joke. Keeping it felt like agreeing to be the punchline. But then I hesitated. My father's voice echoed in my head. Maybe you will get lucky, Gabrielle. I snorted a bitter laugh. Luck was not a strategy. Strategy was a strategy. But habit was a powerful thing. I had bought a few tickets in the past, mostly when the jackpot got this high, just for the fantasy of disappearing. I walked over to the living room and turned on the television for background noise while I went to the fridge to pour a glass of water. I needed to wash the taste of that dry turkey and Preston's arrogance out of my mouth. The local news was ending and the lottery drawing was starting. The announcer, a man with perfectly coiffed hair and a smile that looked too wide for his face, was hyping up the event. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight is the night. The Powerball jackpot has reached a record-breaking $999 million. Get your tickets ready, because someone's life is about to change forever. I stood in the kitchen, glass of water in hand, looking at the screen. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the crumpled thermal paper. I smoothed it out on the counter. It was a quick pick. The numbers were random, generated by a machine in a gas station. The first white ball dropped into the chute. 4. I looked at the ticket. The first number on the first line was 04. My heart gave a little skip. A coincidence. Getting the Powerball number was the hard part anyway. The second ball dropped. 11. I looked down. 11 was right next to the 4. I took a sip of water. My hand was steady. It was just 2 numbers. You won $4 for that. I had doubled my parents' investment. I could buy a coffee. The third ball, 38. My eyes darted to the paper. 38. The glass of water slipped from my hand. It hit the floor and shattered, sending shards of glass and water exploding across the hardwood. I did not flinch. I did not move. I could not feel my feet. The sound of the glass breaking seemed to come from a mile away. The fourth ball, 42, 42. It was there. It was right there. The fifth ball, 59, 59. My breath caught in my throat. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping in my ears like a war drum. It was loud, deafening. My vision started to tunnel. The world narrowed down to 2 things: the television screen and that small piece of pink and white paper. And now for the red Powerball, the announcer said, his voice echoing as if he were underwater. The red ball spun around the chamber, bouncing chaotically before settling into the tube. 7. I looked at the ticket. The final number separated from the rest. 07. Silence. Absolute terrifying silence. I did not scream. I did not jump up and down like they do in the movies. I did not call anyone. Instead, a wave of cold nausea washed over me, so violent and sudden that my knees buckled. I dropped to the floor, ignoring the wet glass that sliced into my palm. My stomach turned inside out. I scrambled on my hands and knees toward the bathroom, kicking the door open and barely making it to the toilet before I violently emptied the contents of my stomach. I retched until there was nothing left, until my throat burned and my eyes streamed with tears. My body was shaking uncontrollably. It was a primal physiological response to shock. My brain could not process the magnitude of the reality shift, so my body was trying to reject it. I sat on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, shivering as if I were freezing to death. $999 million. I was not Gabrielle the secretary anymore. I was a billionaire. I stayed on the floor for 10 minutes, breathing deeply, forcing my heart rate to slow down. One breath in, one breath out. I closed my eyes and visualized a crisis management flowchart. It was what I did for a living. I fixed disasters. This was not a disaster, but it was definitely a crisis. A crisis of abundance. Step 1. Assess the situation. I stood up and walked to the sink. I splashed cold water on my face, washing away the sweat and tears. I looked at myself in the mirror. My skin was pale. My eyes were wide and dark. I looked terrified. "Get it together, Gabrielle," I whispered to my reflection. "Get it together right now." I walked back into the kitchen, stepping carefully over the broken glass. The ticket was still there, lying on the counter, wet from a splash of water but legible. I did not touch it with my bare hands again. I grabbed a pair of tweezers from my beauty kit and a Ziploc bag. I carefully placed the ticket inside the bag, sealing it tight. Step 2. Secure the asset. I went to my home office. I turned on my computer and my scanner. I scanned the ticket front and back at the highest resolution possible. Then I took photos of it with my phone. I logged into my encrypted cloud server, the one I used for my most sensitive corporate clients. I uploaded the files into a folder named Tax Documents 2023, a folder no one would ever look in. Then I went to my bookshelf. I pulled down a thick, boring textbook titled Advanced Corporate Litigation. I opened it to page 394. I placed the Ziploc bag with the ticket inside the book and snapped it shut. I placed the book back on the shelf, sandwiched between two other dusty volumes. Only then did I allow myself to sit down in my office chair. The shaking had stopped. A strange, cold calmness settled over me. It was the same icy focus I felt when a CEO called me at 3 in the morning because the FBI was raiding their office. I was in the zone. My phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from Candace. Photo attachment. It was a selfie of her and Preston holding champagne glasses. Caption read, "Pack your bags, loser." "Oh wait, you are not coming." I stared at the photo. I looked at Preston's smug face. I looked at Candace's fake smile. I looked at the background of my parents' living room, the house I had saved, the furniture I had paid to reupholster. 10 minutes ago, that text would have hurt. It would have ruined my night. It would have made me feel small and worthless. But now, I picked up the phone. I did not reply. I did not delete it. I screenshotted it and saved it to a new folder on my computer. I named the folder Evidence. I stood up and walked back to the bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was different. The fear was gone. In its place was something harder, something sharper. My parents had given me a piece of paper they thought was trash. They had laughed at me. They had mocked my existence. They thought I was garbage. I leaned in close to the mirror until my breath fogged the glass. I looked deep into my own eyes, seeing the reflection of a woman who finally held the nuclear codes to her own life. "They think I am trash," I whispered, my voice low and steady in the empty apartment. A slow, dark smile spread across my face. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a predator who has just realized the cage door is open. "Well, Mom and Dad, I am trash worth $1 billion, and I am about to take you all out." The offices of King & Associates were located on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building in Buckhead. It was a fortress of glass and steel that looked down on the rest of Atlanta with cold indifference. This was the world I actually belonged to, even if my family thought I belonged in a cubicle. I walked past the receptionist, a young woman with perfectly highlighted hair who gave my off-the-rack blazer a skeptical once-over. She did not know that I had already bypassed her security clearance. I walked straight to the double-glass doors at the end of the hall and pushed them open. Julian King was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window staring out at the city skyline. He turned around as I entered, his expression a mixture of surprise and mild annoyance. Julian was the kind of lawyer people called when they had killed someone, or when they had lost $1 billion. We had worked together on a crisis management case 2 years ago, involving a pharmaceutical CEO and a very messy divorce. He respected my work, but he also knew my family situation. To him, I was a brilliant strategist shackled to a dead weight. "Gabrielle," he said, checking his watch, "you know you cannot just walk in here without an appointment. I have a meeting with the district attorney in 20 minutes. If you are here to ask for a job recommendation again, the answer is still yes, but I need you to actually send me the resume." I did not say a word. I walked over to his massive mahogany desk. It was completely empty except for a Mont Blanc pen and a legal pad. I reached into my bag and pulled out the heavy textbook on corporate litigation. I placed it gently on the center of the desk. "I am not here for a job, Julian," I said, my voice steady. "I am here to become your biggest client." Julian raised an eyebrow. He walked over to his leather chair and sat down, leaning back with an amused smirk. "Is that so? Did you finally decide to sue your parents for emotional distress? Because I would take that case pro bono, just for the entertainment value." "Open the book page. 394, I said. He looked at me for a long moment, analyzing my face for any sign of a joke. Finding none, he leaned forward and flipped the book open. He saw the Ziploc bag. He saw the pink and white thermal paper inside. He picked up the bag, holding it up to the light. He squinted at the numbers. Then he looked at me. Then he looked back at the numbers. He reached for his keyboard. I heard the rapid clicking of keys as he pulled up the Georgia lottery results. He looked at his screen. He looked at the ticket. He looked at his screen again. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. I could hear the hum of the air conditioning and the distant wail of a siren 45 floors below. Julian King. The man who had stared down federal judges without blinking went completely pale. He slowly lowered the bag back onto the desk as if it were made of nitroglycerin. $999 million, he whispered. He looked up at me, and for the first time in our acquaintance, the arrogance was gone. In its place was pure, unadulterated awe. "Gabrielle, is this real?" "It is real," I said, pulling a chair out and sitting down. "I bought the ticket. Well, I acquired the ticket yesterday. I have not signed the back yet. I have not told a soul. You are the first person to know." Julian let out a long breath, running a hand over his face. He suddenly looked very awake. He pressed a button on his intercom. "Cancel the meeting with the DA. Tell him I have a family emergency. Hold all my calls." He stood up and walked over to a wet bar in the corner, pouring 2 glasses of scotch. He handed one to me. It was 10 in the morning, but I took it. "Okay," he said, pacing the room, his shark instincts kicking in. "Here is the situation. You cannot claim this under your own name. If you do, your face will be on every news channel from here to Tokyo by sunset. Every long-lost cousin, every charity, and every con artist in the hemisphere will be camping on your lawn." "That is why I am here," I said, taking a sip of the amber liquid. "I want to set up a blind trust. I know Georgia law allows lottery winners of prizes over $250,000 to remain anonymous if they claim it through a legal entity." Julian nodded approvingly. "Smart. Very smart. We will create a limited liability company. We need a name. Something generic. Something that sounds like a boring logistics firm. Phoenix LLC, I said. Julian paused. Phoenix, rising from the ashes. A bit dramatic for a holding company, but I like it. Okay, Phoenix LLC. We will draft the articles of incorporation today. I will act as the trustee. We will claim the lump sum option. After federal and state taxes, you are looking at roughly $580 million in liquid cash deposited into a private account in the Cayman Islands or Switzerland, whichever you prefer. 580 million, I repeated. The number felt abstract. It was not money anymore. It was power. But Julian stopped pacing. He turned to look at me, his eyes narrowing. There is a problem, a big one. Where did you get the ticket, Gabrielle? You said you acquired it. Did you buy it yourself? I hesitated. This was the part I had been dreading. My father bought it, I said. He gave it to me as a gift for Thanksgiving. Julian froze. He slammed his hand down on the desk. Damn it, Gabrielle, that complicates everything. He walked over to me, leaning in close, his face serious. Listen to me very carefully. In the eyes of the law, a lottery ticket is a bearer instrument. Whoever holds it owns it, but family law is messy. If your parents find out that the ticket they bought won the jackpot, they will sue you. They will claim it was a joint venture. They will claim they asked you to hold it for them. They will claim they never intended to gift you the winnings, only the piece of paper as a joke. They gave it to me, I argued. They laughed at me. They said good luck. It does not matter what they said then, Julian countered. It matters what they can prove in court. If a jury hears that a father bought a ticket and his daughter cashed it, they will sympathize with the father. They will say you stole it. Or at the very least they will force you to split it. And knowing your family, they will not settle for 50-50. They will want it all. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. The image of Preston spending my money on his gambling debts flashed through my mind. The image of Candace laughing on a yacht paid for by my stress. So what do? I asked. You need proof, Julian said. You need indisputable, bulletproof evidence that they disclaimed interest in that ticket. You need them to say on record that the ticket is yours and yours alone, regardless of the outcome. And you need them to say it before they know it is a winner. I thought about the timeline. They were leaving for the cruise tomorrow morning. I had less than 24 hours. I have to go to their house today, I said, thinking aloud. I have to go help Candace pack. She ordered me to come over. Julian nodded, his eyes gleaming. Good. That is your opportunity. You need to get them to admit it. Do not just get them to say it is yours. Get them to reject it. Get them to call it trash. Get them to say they do not want a single cent from it. He opened his desk drawer and pulled out a sleek black pen. He slid it across the desk to me. This is not a pen, Julian said. It is a high-fidelity audio recorder. It has a 12-hour battery life and can pick up a whisper from across the room. Wear it. Do not take it off. Get the confession, Gabrielle. Because once we file that claim with the Lottery Commission, the war starts. And you cannot win a war without ammunition. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy in my hand. It felt like a weapon. I looked at Julian. I am not hiring you as a friend, Julian. I am hiring you as a weapon. I want this ironclad. If they try to come after me, I want to be able to bury them in legal paperwork so deep they will need a submarine to find daylight. Julian smiled a genuine shark-like grin. Gabrielle, for $580 million, I will bury them so deep they will hit magma. Go get the recording. I will have the paperwork for Phoenix LLC ready for your signature by the time you get back. I stood up and shook his hand. I walked out of the office with the Ziploc bag safely back in my purse and the spy pen clipped to my blazer. I was walking into the lion's den. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the prey. I was the hunter. I pulled my sedan into the driveway of Candace and Preston's sprawling suburban home. It was a new construction in a gated community, the kind of house that looked impressive from the street with its manicured lawn and two-story columns, but felt hollow on the inside. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror one last time. I was wearing my standard family uniform, which consisted of jeans and a nondescript sweater, but today I had a new accessory. Clipped to the neckline of my shirt was the sleek black pen Julian had given me. It looked like a cheap writing utensil, but the tiny red light hidden on the underside was blinking steadily, indicating that it was recording every sound in high-definition audio. I took a deep breath. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. I was walking into the lion's den, not with a whip, but with a piece of paper that could destroy me if I played my cards wrong. I reached into my purse and touched the photocopy of the lottery ticket. The original was safe in the bank vault, but this piece of paper was the bait. I got out of the car and walked to the front door. I did not bother knocking. I knew the code. I punched it in and the door beeped open. The moment I stepped inside, I was assaulted by the chaos. The house was usually staged to look like a magazine cover, but today it looked like a bomb had gone off in a department store. Suitcases were open everywhere. Piles of designer clothes were strewn across the living room furniture. Shoes were scattered on the stairs. Candace was standing in the middle of the foyer holding two different bikinis and screaming at the ceiling. Preston. I cannot find my Louis Vuitton sandals, the gold ones. I need them for the captain's dinner. Preston's voice drifted down from the upstairs loft. I do not know where your shoes are, Candace. Ask your sister. She is the one coming to clean up this mess. I clenched my jaw. I was not a maid. I was a crisis manager. But right now, being the maid was my cover. I am here, Candace. I called out, keeping my voice neutral. Candace spun around. Her hair was in curlers and she looked stressed. Thank God. Finally. Look at this place, Gabby. We leave for the port at 6 in the morning, and I have not even packed my evening wear. I need you to steam the silk dresses and fold everything properly. Preston just shoves things in his bag like an animal. She did not say hello. She did not ask how I was. She just pointed at a pile of silk and walked away. I walked into the living room and started picking up the clothes. I needed to wait for the right moment. I needed both of them in the room. About 10 minutes later, Preston came down the stairs. He was wearing basketball shorts and holding a beer. It was 2 in the afternoon on a Friday, but apparently being unemployed and living off credit allowed for day drinking. Ah, the help has arrived, he said, taking a swig of his beer. Good job, Gabby. Make sure you pack my golf shirts on top. I do not want them getting wrinkled. I folded a blue polo shirt, smoothing out the fabric. I waited until Candace came back into the room holding a stack of jewelry boxes. She dumped them on the coffee table right next to where I was standing. Okay, I have everyone here, I thought. It is now or never. I stood up, wiping my hands on my jeans. I reached into my back pocket and pulled out the folded photocopy of the lottery ticket. I held it in my hand, letting it tremble slightly. I needed to look pathetic. I needed to look unsure. Hey guys, I said, my voice soft. Before we get too busy with the packing, I wanted to talk to you about something. Candace looked up from her jewelry, annoyed. What is it, Gabby? We do not have time for a therapy session right now. It is about the gift Mom and Dad gave me yesterday, I said, holding out the paper. The lottery ticket. Preston laughed. A loud barking sound. Oh my God, are you still holding on to that thing? I thought you would have thrown it in the trash by now. I looked down at the floor, feigning embarrassment. Well, I was thinking about it, but I felt guilty. You guys got the cruise and I got this. It feels unbalanced. I know Mom and Dad were just joking, but what if it actually wins something? What if it wins $10 or $100? I do not want to take money that should belong to the family. I took a step toward Candace, holding the paper out to her. Here, I said. You should take it back. It was a gift from Dad, but he bought it with family money. If it wins anything, it should go toward your trip. You guys deserve the spending money more than I do. The room went silent for a second. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought the microphone would pick it up. This was the gamble. If they took the ticket back, if they said yes, we will keep it just in case, then I was ruined. I would lose everything. I was betting my entire future on their arrogance. Candace looked at this piece of paper in my hand as if I were offering her a used tissue. She curled her lip in disgust. You, Gabby, are you serious? You want me to hold on to a piece of gas station paper? It probably smells like smoke. I do not want that garbage in my purse. But it might be worth something, I insisted, pushing. Maybe we should split it. Just in case. Preston walked over and slapped the paper out of my hand. It fluttered to the floor, landing face up on the expensive Persian rug. Jesus, Gabby, you are pathetic, he said, shaking his head. Do you really think we need your charity? We are going on a $13,000 cruise. We do not need your $10 scratch-off winnings. It is a Powerball ticket, I corrected him quietly. Whatever, Preston scoffed. Listen to me. We do not want it. We do not need it. Mom and Dad gave it to you because it is a joke. Just like your career is a joke. Just like your car is a joke. It is a symbol, Gabby. It is a symbol of how little you matter. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, but I forced myself to stay calm. The recording was rolling. So you are saying you do not want any part of it? I asked, looking directly at him. Even if it wins big. Even if it wins the jackpot. Preston threw his head back and laughed. If that piece of trash wins the jackpot, I will eat my own shoe. Keep it. Buy yourself a loaf of bread. Maybe get a makeover. God knows you need one. I turned to Candace. She was busy untangling a gold necklace. Candace, what about you? I asked. Do you want it back? Dad bought it. Candace did not even look up. She waved her hand dismissively. It is yours, Gabby, she said, her voice bored. I do not care about it. It is trash. If you win $1 million, good for you. You can finally move out of that sad apartment. But honestly, the odds are 0, so stop annoying me with it. I disown it. I reject it. It is 100% yours. Now can you please focus on steaming my red dress? It is wrinkled and I need to look hot for the captain's dinner. I disown it. I reject it. It is 100% yours. The words hung in the air, sweeter than any symphony I had ever heard. I looked down at the paper on the rug. I slowly bent down and picked it up. My hand was steady now. Okay, I said, tucking the paper back into my pocket. I just wanted to be clear. I did not want anyone saying I was ungrateful. You are ungrateful, Preston muttered, walking back toward the kitchen. You are ungrateful for wasting our time. Now get back to work. I spent the next 2 hours steaming dresses and folding shirts. I listened to them talk about how rich they were. I listened to them plan their excursions. I listened to Preston brag about a bonus check I knew did not exist. And the whole time the little red light on my chest was blinking, capturing every insult, every lie, and every admission. When I finally finished packing their suitcases, I walked to the door. We are leaving at 6 a.m., Candace called out from the couch. Do not be late to drive us to the airport. And bring coffee. Starbucks. Not the cheap stuff you drink. I paused at the door. I touched the pen again. Don't worry, Candace, I said. I will be there. I would not miss seeing you off for the world. I walked out to my car and sat in the driver's seat. I pulled the pen off my shirt and pressed the stop button. I plugged it into my laptop and saved the file immediately. I named the file The Waiver. I put on my headphones and played it back. Preston's voice filled the car. If that piece of trash wins the jackpot, I will eat my own shoe. Keep it. Then Candace's voice. Clear and sharp. I disown it. I reject it. It is 100% yours. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. A single tear rolled down my cheek, but it was not from sadness. It was from relief. They had just signed their own financial death warrants. I looked at the house one last time. Enjoy the cruise, I whispered, because when you get back, this house won't be yours anymore. I put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. I had a meeting with Julian to finalize the Phoenix Trust. And then I had a shopping trip to plan. Not for clothes, but for debt. I was going to buy every mistake they had ever made, and I was going to make them pay for it. I drove straight from my sister's house to my apartment. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my mind was racing at 100 miles an hour. I had the recording. I had the disclaimer. Legally, I was in a fortress. But to truly win a war, you do not just need a shield, you need a sword. And I was about to forge the sharpest sword imaginable. I walked into my home office and locked the door behind me. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and woke up my triple monitor setup. To my family, this room was where I supposedly typed up memos and organized calendars. To my clients, this was the nerve center where I saved their reputations. I cracked my knuckles and logged into the encrypted database I used for background checks. It was a proprietary system used by private investigators and high-level corporate security firms. It cost me $5,000 a year to maintain access, and it was worth every penny. I typed in the name Preston James Miller. I entered his date of birth and his social security number, which I had memorized years ago when I helped him file his taxes because he claimed the forms were too complicated for his creative brain. I hit enter. The screen went black for a second as the search algorithm crawled through thousands of public and private databases. Then the results began to cascade down the center monitor like a digital waterfall. I leaned forward, taking a sip of cold coffee. Let us see who you really are, Preston. The first thing that caught my eye was his employment history. At Thanksgiving dinner, Preston had bragged about a massive deal he was closing with a logistics firm. He had claimed he was on the verge of a 7-figure commission. I looked at the employment verification tab. Status terminated. Date of separation 6 months ago. I blinked. He had been unemployed for half a year. But it was the reason for separation that made my blood run cold. It was not a layoff. It was not downsizing. Cause of termination: gross misconduct. Violation of company harassment policy. I dug deeper, accessing the court records attached to the file. There was a settled lawsuit. A female intern had reported him for inappropriate advances and sending unsolicited photos. The company had fired him immediately and settled with the girl to avoid a scandal. Preston had signed a non-disclosure agreement, which was why he had been able to keep it quiet. I felt a wave of nausea. My sister was married to a predator who was currently pretending to be a titan of industry. But if he had been unemployed for 6 months, how was he paying the mortgage on that massive house? How was he leasing the Mercedes? How was he buying vintage wines? I switched tabs to his credit report. It was a sea of red ink. Credit score 420. I let out a low whistle. That was not just bad, that was catastrophic. That was the kind of score that meant you could not even get a cell phone plan without a deposit. I scrolled down to his liabilities. He had maxed out 4 credit cards: Visa, MasterCard, American Express. All of them were over the limit. But where was the money going? He wasn't paying the mortgage because the house was already 3 months behind. I saw the foreclosure notice pending in the county clerk's system. It had not been served yet, but it was coming. Then I found it. The bank statements, DraftKings, FanDuel, Crypto.com, BetMGM. Page after page of online gambling transactions. $500 here, $2,000 there. He was bleeding money. He was chasing losses. He was an addict. He was taking cash advances from credit cards to buy cryptocurrency, which he then lost on sports bets. It was a spiral of stupidity and desperation. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ruin of a man on my screen. This was the man my father called a genius. This was the man my mother said I should aspire to marry. He was a hollow shell, a fraud. But then I saw something that made me sit up straight. I looked at the transaction history for the last 48 hours. I wanted to see how he had paid for the cruise. My parents had given them $13,000, but I knew Preston. He would never use that money for the actual bill. He would try to keep the cash. I accessed the reservation system for Royal Caribbean. It was technically a breach of privacy, but I was past the point of caring about ethics. I was hunting. I found their booking. The owner's suite. Total cost $13,400. Status pending. He had not paid it. He had put down a $500 deposit 2 months ago, but the final balance was due upon check-in. I frowned. My parents had transferred the money to him yesterday. I saw the transfer in his bank records. $15,000 from Harold Winter's retirement fund. And there it was. Within an hour of the transfer hitting his account, Preston had moved $12,000 of it to a crypto wallet. He had gambled away the cruise money. He had gambled away my parents' retirement gift before he even packed his bags. So how was he planning to get on the ship tomorrow? I kept digging. I looked at his browser history, which was synced to the cloud account I had access to because I set up his iPad. He had a saved credit card in his autofill settings. It was a Visa ending in 4598. I recognized those numbers. That was not Preston's card. That was my father's emergency credit card. The one with the $50,000 limit. The one Dad kept in the safe in his study. Preston must have taken a photo of it during one of their family dinners. I pieced the plan together and it was sickeningly brilliant. Preston had stolen the cash gift to pay off his bookie or try to win back his losses. He planned to show up at the port and use my father's stolen credit card number to pay the $13,000 balance. My father would not notice the charge until the statement came next month. By then, Preston would concoct some lie about a billing error or identity theft. He was going to steal from them twice. I stared at the screen, my finger hovering over the mouse. I could call my father right now. I could tell him everything. I could send him the screenshots of the gambling debts, the termination letter, the stolen card info. I could save him $15,000. I could stop them from getting on that ship. I reached for my phone. My thumb hovered over my father's contact. Then I remembered the dinner. I remembered the folding table. I remembered the way my father laughed when he threw the lottery ticket at me. I remembered Preston saying, "Know your place in the food chain." I lowered the phone. No. If I saved them now, they would never learn. My father would not believe me. He would say I was jealous. He would say I hacked Preston's computer because I was bitter about being single. Preston would spin a story, and they would believe him because they wanted to believe him. They needed the illusion of the golden son-in-law more than they needed the truth. I had to let the illusion shatter, and I had to let it shatter in public. I opened a new window on my browser. I went to the fraud prevention portal for Visa. I did not log in as myself. I logged in using the backdoor credentials I had for verifying client assets. I located the card ending in 4598. My father's card. I did not cancel it. That would be suspicious. Instead, I flagged it for heightened security monitoring. I added a note to the file. Suspected compromised data. Flag any transaction over $5,000 originating from travel merchants. Require voice authorization from account holder. I smiled. When Preston tried to swipe that card at the cruise terminal tomorrow morning, it was not going to go through. The machine would decline it. He would have to call the bank. But he couldn't call the bank because he wasn't the account holder. He would have to ask my father to call. And that is when he would have to explain why he was using my father's card when he had just been given $15,000 in cash. It was a trap. A beautiful, elegant trap. I saved all the files to my evidence folder. I printed out the termination letter and the gambling records. I put them in a manila envelope. I would need them later. I leaned back in my chair and watched the sun beginning to set over the Atlanta skyline. The city was waking up. Lights were flickering on in the high rises. Somewhere out there, my family was sleeping soundly, dreaming of Mediterranean beaches and unlimited buffets. They had no idea that their entire world was built on a foundation of lies, and I had just planted the dynamite. I took the $2 lottery ticket out of the safe. I held it up to the screen, comparing it to Preston's debt. One piece of paper was worth nearly $1 billion. The other was a record of total moral bankruptcy. "Sleep tight, Preston," I whispered to the empty room. "Enjoy your last night of freedom. Because tomorrow the bill comes due, and I am the one collecting." The drive to Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport was a 45-minute exercise in suffocation. I was behind the wheel of my father's oversized SUV, acting as the unpaid chauffeur for the royal family of delusion. Preston sat in the passenger seat with his knees spread wide, encroaching on the gear shift, his fingers drumming annoyingly on the dashboard. In the back seat, my parents and Candace were squeezed together amidst a sea of designer luggage, talking over each other in a cacophony of excitement. The air inside the car was thick with the scent of my mother's heavy floral perfume mixed with Preston's musk and the underlying stench of my own simmering rage. I kept my eyes fixed on the road, gripping the steering wheel so hard my leather gloves groaned. I was invisible to them. I was not a daughter or a sister-in-law. I was simply the transportation mechanism, a pair of hands to steer the vehicle while they planned a future that I had already dismantled. Preston reached out and changed the radio station without asking me, cutting off the quiet jazz I had been listening to and blasting a loud talk radio station about crypto markets. "You need to listen to this, Gabby," he said, lecturing me while staring out the window. "You might learn something about real economics. It is not just about saving pennies. It is about leverage. That is what this trip is about. Leverage. I am going to be rubbing elbows with titans of industry on this ship. One conversation at the poolside bar could be worth millions." I bit the inside of my cheek. I knew exactly who he would be rubbing elbows with. The security team when they escorted him back to his cabin after his credit card declined. But I said nothing. I just nodded like the obedient simpleton they thought I was. "That is right, Preston," my father chimed in from the back. "You have the gift of Gab's son. You are a closer. Just make sure you do not work too hard. This is a vacation. We paid good money so you could relax." Candace leaned forward, resting her chin on the back of my seat right next to my ear. Her breath smelled of peppermint gum. "And speaking of relaxing, Gabby, we made a list of chores for you on the fridge. It is pretty detailed, so try not to mess it up." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were bright with malice. "Chores," I repeated, keeping my voice flat. "Yes, chores," she said. "Duchess needs to be walked 3 times a day, and do not just let her out in the yard. You have to actually walk her around the neighborhood so she gets exercise. But do not take her near the construction site down the street, because the dust makes her sneeze. And make sure you filter her water. She got an upset stomach last time you gave her tap water." My mother joined in. "And the hydrangeas, Gabrielle. If it does not rain, you need to water them every morning before the sun gets too hot. If they die because you were too lazy to drive over in the morning, I will be very upset. Those bushes cost a fortune." I tightened my grip on the wheel. They were treating me like a house-sitter. No worse than a house-sitter. You pay a house-sitter. I was an indentured servant. "Don't worry, Mom," I said, my eyes focused on the brake lights ahead. "The plants will be taken care of." "And do not eat all the food in the pantry," Preston added with a chuckle. "I bought some imported prosciutto and expensive cheeses. Those are for when we get back. If you get hungry, order a pizza. Or better yet, eat some of that kale you are always chewing on. Maybe that is why you are so uptight. You need some red meat." The car erupted in laughter again. I forced a smile, a tight, painful grimace that felt like a mask cracking on my face. "We will bring you back a souvenir, though," Candace said magnanimously. "Maybe a keychain from Barcelona. Or a t-shirt if we find one on the clearance rack. I saw some cute ones last time that said my sister went to Europe and all I got was this lousy shirt. It would be perfect for you." More laughter. I pulled the SUV up to the departures curb at the international terminal. The Delta sign loomed overhead, promising escape. I put the car in park and popped the trunk. "All right, everyone out," I said. They spilled out of the car, stretching and complaining about the drive as if they hadn't just spent 40 minutes sitting on heated leather seats while I navigated rush-hour traffic. I got out and walked to the back of the car. None of them moved to help. Preston stood on the curb checking his watch and adjusting his sunglasses. My father was busy tipping the sky cap for a wheelchair he did not need just to look important. I heaved the heavy suitcases out of the trunk one by one. Candace's bags were impossibly heavy, stuffed with shoes and evening gowns she would never get to wear. I slammed them onto the sidewalk, wiping a bead of sweat from my forehead. "Is that everything?" Preston asked, not looking at me. "That is everything," I said, closing the trunk. "Great. We'll try not to burn the house down while we are gone." My mother stepped forward. She did not hug me. She patted my cheek with a gloved hand, two sharp taps that felt more like a reprimand than affection. "Be good, Gabrielle, and check the mail. If any important letters come for Preston, put them on his desk. Do not open them." "I promise, Mom," I said. "I won't open a thing." Because I had already opened everything. I had opened their secrets, I had opened their lies, and I had opened the trap door beneath their feet. They turned their backs on me. They walked toward the automatic doors, a phalanx of arrogance and unearned wealth. Preston led the way, striding like a king. Candace clicked along beside him in her heels. My parents followed, struggling to keep up with their golden children. They did not look back. Not once. They did not wave. They did not mouth thank you. They just vanished into the terminal, swallowed by the crowd, leaving me standing alone on the curb next to the idling SUV. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 30 years. The air tasted like exhaust fumes and jet fuel, but to me it smelled like oxygen, pure, unadulterated oxygen. "Goodbye," I whispered. Goodbye to the abuse. Goodbye to the feeling of being small. Goodbye to the old Gabrielle Winters. I got back into the driver's seat. I did not drive away immediately. I sat there in the quiet of the car, watching the people scurrying past, families hugging, lovers kissing goodbye, businessmen rushing to meetings. My phone buzzed in my purse. It was a specific vibration pattern, one long continuous hum. It was the notification setting I had assigned to only one app, my secure banking app. My heart stopped beating for a second. My hands trembled as I reached into my bag. I pulled out the phone. The screen was bright in the dim interior of the car. One new notification from Phoenix LLC trust account. Wire transfer received. I tapped the notification. Face ID scanned my features. The banking app opened. The screen refreshed. A spinning circle of doom that lasted for 3 seconds, and then the numbers appeared. $580,000,000,000.00. I stared at it. $580 million. The tax man had taken his cut. The federal government had taken their share. The state of Georgia had taken theirs. And this was what was left. More money than my father could make in 1,000 lifetimes. More money than Preston could lose in 1,000,000 bets. I ran my finger over the screen, touching the commas. It was real. The money was sitting in an offshore account protected by layers of encryption and legal firewalls that Julian had built overnight. It was mine. All mine. I looked up through the windshield at the terminal building where my family was currently standing in the TSA line, taking off their shoes and belts, oblivious to the fact that they were walking into a buzzsaw. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. It started low, a rumble in my throat, and then it erupted. I laughed until tears streamed down my face. I laughed until my stomach hurt. I laughed until a traffic cop tapped on my window and told me I couldn't idle there any longer. I wiped my eyes and rolled down the window. "Sorry, officer," I said, flashing a smile that was brighter than the sun. "I was just checking my bank balance." The cop looked at me, tired and bored. "All right, well, move along, ma'am. You are blocking traffic." I put the car in gear. "I am moving," I said. "I am moving on." I pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic. I turned the radio dial away from Preston's crypto station. I found a station playing heavy bass hip-hop. I cranked the volume up until the speakers rattled. I drove toward the highway, not toward my parents' house to water their hydrangeas, but toward downtown, toward my new life. I had 24 hours before they landed in the Mediterranean. 24 hours to execute the final phase of my plan. I had the money. I had the evidence. Now I just needed to pull the trigger. I tapped the steering wheel in time with the beat. Watch out, world. The maid just bought the mansion, and she is about to clean house. The port of Miami was gleaming under the morning sun, a sprawling complex of glass and white concrete that promised escape to thousands of eager tourists. But for the Winters family, specifically for Preston and Candace, the only entrance that mattered was the private VIP terminal reserved for star-class guests of Royal Caribbean. I was not there physically, of course. I was sitting in my climate-controlled office 300 miles away, watching the GPS tracker on the SUV I had lent them. But I knew the scene as intimately as if I were hovering over their shoulders. I knew the smell of the ocean air mixed with expensive luggage leather. I knew the sound of champagne flutes clinking in the exclusive lounge where they were currently waiting for their boarding group to be called. Preston was undoubtedly in his element. I could picture him wearing his linen suit unbuttoned at the collar, trying to look like a tech mogul on a sabbatical. Candace would be live streaming to her 3,000 followers, holding her phone high to capture the perfect angle of the ship's massive hull through the floor-to-ceiling windows. They felt invincible. They felt rich. They felt like they had successfully scammed another luxury experience out of life without paying the full price. But the bill always comes due. And today, the bill collector was a fraud algorithm I had manipulated 12 hours ago. The boarding process for the owner's suite is designed to be seamless. There are no lines. There is no waiting with the masses. You are escorted to a private desk where a concierge named Sebastian or Juliana greets you by name and offers you a hot towel. It is a theater of service meant to make you feel like royalty. Preston stepped up to the marble counter, his chest puffed out. He slapped his passport down with the confidence of a man who believes the world owes him a favor. Behind him, my parents stood beaming. Harold and Joyce were soaking it in. This was the return on their investment. This was why they had ignored me for 30 years to produce a daughter and son-in-law who could navigate these spaces so effortlessly. "Mr. Miller," the concierge said, typing rapidly on her keyboard. "Welcome aboard. We are delighted to have you and your family in the owner's suite. I see the deposit was paid 2 months ago. I just need a credit card for the remaining balance of $12,900 plus a hold for onboard incidentals." "No problem," Preston said, his voice loud enough for the people in the economy line to hear. "Put it on the visa. It is the black card." He pulled a heavy metal card from his wallet. It was not a real Centurion card, but a vanity card he had custom-made to look like one. He slid it across the counter with a flourish. The concierge smiled professionally and inserted the card into the chip reader. There is a specific sound a credit card terminal makes when a transaction is approved. It is a soft, pleasant chime. And then there is the sound it makes when a transaction is denied. It is a harsh, guttural buzz, a sound of rejection. Buzz. The concierge frowned slightly. She pulled the card out and wiped the chip on her blazer. "Sometimes the machines are sensitive," she apologized. "Let me try that again." She inserted it again. Buzz. Preston's smile faltered. He let out a nervous chuckle. "That is strange. I just used that card for the Uber Black this morning. It must be your system." "I am afraid the system is declining the charge, Mr. Miller," the concierge said, her voice dropping to a discreet whisper. "The message says, 'Do not honor. Do you have another form of payment?'" Preston's face flushed a deep shade of crimson. Behind him, Candace lowered her phone, ending her live stream abruptly. My father Harold stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Is everything all right, son?" Harold asked. "It is fine," Preston snapped, his cool facade cracking. "Just a bank glitch. You know how it is when you travel. They trigger these fraud alerts over nothing." He pulled out a second card. "An American Express. Try this one," he said, jamming it into the reader himself. Buzz. Declined. Preston was sweating now. Beads of perspiration were forming on his upper lip. He dug into his wallet, frantically pulling out a MasterCard. Buzz. Declined. He did not know that at 3 in the morning I had used my credentials as a certified fraud examiner to flag every single card in his name. I had submitted a report to the credit bureaus indicating a high probability of identity theft due to his gambling leaks. I had effectively frozen his financial existence. To the banking computers, Preston Miller was currently a walking red flag. Sir, the concierge said, her smile becoming tight and strained. We have a line forming. If you cannot provide a valid method of payment, we cannot issue your CPAS cards. The balance must be cleared before boarding. The silence that followed was deafening. The people in the lounge were staring. The illusion of the wealthy power couple was dissolving in real time. Preston looked at Candace. Candace looked at her shoes. They both knew the truth. They did not have the money. Preston had gambled away the cash my parents gave them. And his plan to use my father's stolen credit card numbers was failing because he couldn't type them into the machine manually right in front of my father. Preston turned slowly to face my parents. He looked like a cornered animal. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a pathetic desperation. Harold, he started, his voice cracking. I hate to ask this. My accounts are frozen. It is a security protocol because of that big deal I am closing. The assets are locked until the merger finalizes next week. I cannot access the liquid cash right now. My father stared at him confused. But son, we just gave you $15,000. 2 days ago. Preston flinched. Right. Yes. I moved that into the investment portfolio immediately to maximize the yield. You know me always thinking about compound interest. I cannot pull it out without a penalty. It was a lie so transparent a child could see through it. But my father was not looking at a liar. He was looking at his own ego. He was looking at the line of people behind them, waiting to see if the Winters family was actually broke. He was looking at the concierge who was tapping her nails on the counter. The shame was palpable. It radiated off my father like heat. He could not bear the thought of being turned away. He could not bear the thought of walking back to the parking lot with his luggage and his tail between his legs. How much is it? My father asked, his voice hollow. 13,000 plus 5,000 for the hold, Preston whispered. 18,000 total. My mother gasped. Harold, that is everything. That is the rest of the emergency fund. That is the money for the property taxes. My father silenced her with a look. He reached for his wallet. His hand was shaking. He pulled out his debit card, the one linked to his pension, the one that paid for their groceries and their electricity. He handed it to the concierge. Use this, he said quietly. No, Harold Preston said, feigning protest. I cannot let you do that. I will pay you back the second we get back. With interest. Double interest. Just pay the Lady Preston, my father snapped. The concierge took the card. She ran it. Chime. Approved. My father let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. He had just spent his last liquid dollar to save face for a man who had stolen from him. He had just mortgaged his own security to keep the lie alive for 2 more weeks. Thank you, Mr. Winters, the concierge said, handing the card back. Here are your boarding passes. Enjoy your vacation. They walked toward the gangway, but the spring was gone from their step. Preston walked with his head down. Candace was not filming anymore. My parents walked behind them, looking older and smaller than they had 5 minutes ago. I watched the tracker dot move from the terminal onto the ship. You bought the ticket, Dad, I said to the empty room. You paid for the ride. Now you have to take it. I closed the laptop. The financial noose was tight. They were on the ship. They were trapped in the middle of the ocean. And while they were gone playing pretend, I was going to dismantle everything they had left on land. Phase 1 was complete. Phase 2 was about to begin. And Phase 2 involved a real estate lawyer, a foreclosure notice, and a locum sith. Bon voyage, I whispered. Don't worry about the house. I will take good care of it. While my family was sailing into international waters thinking they had escaped reality, I was sitting in the climate-controlled silence of Julian King's conference room, buying the ground out from under them. The view from the 45th floor was spectacular, but the view on Julian's laptop screen was far more interesting. We were looking at a digital deed of trust. specifically the mortgage documents for 428 Maplewood Drive, my childhood home. The house my father claimed was his castle, the house my mother guarded like a fortress. Julian tapped a pen against his chin, his eyes scanning the foreclosure risk assessment report. It is worse than we thought, Gabrielle. Your father has not made a full mortgage payment in 8 months. He has been paying the interest only, and even then he has been late 3 times this year. The bank has already flagged the loan as a non-performing asset. They are desperate to offload it before it hits their quarterly loss report. I leaned forward looking at the numbers. My father was a proud man, a man who lectured me constantly about fiscal responsibility. A man who told me that renting an apartment was throwing money away. Yet here he was squatting in his own home, hoping the bank would not notice he was insolvent. He had taken the equity out years ago to fund Preston's wedding and Candace's lifestyle, and now the well was dry. Buy it, I said, my voice flat. Julian nodded. I have the bank's asset manager on the other line. Phoenix LLC is offering to purchase the debt note for 90 cents on the dollar. Since it is a distressed asset, they are going to jump at it. Once the wire clears, Phoenix LLC becomes the lien holder. We step into the shoes of the bank. Do it, I repeated. And once we own the note, I want to accelerate the foreclosure clause. Julian typed a message to the bank. Accelerating the clause means calling the entire loan due immediately. They will have 30 days to pay the full balance of $400,000 or face eviction. I know what it means, Julian. I wrote the check for the wire transfer. Execute the trade. I watched as he hit the enter key. A few seconds later, a confirmation window popped up. Transaction complete. I let out a long, slow breath. I now owned my parents' house. I owned the kitchen where my mother made me wear an apron while everyone else relaxed. I owned the dining room where my father threw a $2 lottery ticket at me. I owned the bedroom where I used to cry into my pillow, wondering why I wasn't good enough. It was all mine. Now for the second part of the afternoon entertainment, I said, opening my own laptop. I navigated to Instagram. I did not have to search hard. Candace was live. I clicked on her profile. The video stream loaded instantly. The connection was surprisingly good for being at sea. Candace was standing on the balcony of the owner's suite, the wind whipping her blonde extensions around her face. She was holding a glass of champagne and pouting at the camera. Hey guys, she chirped, her voice high and fake. We just left the port and oh my god, the view is to die for. We are staying in the biggest suite on the ship because my hubby spoils me rotten. Show them the jacuzzi, babe. The camera panned clumsily to show Preston sitting in a private hot tub on the balcony. He was wearing sunglasses and holding a cigar, looking like a discount version of a rap video extra. Living the dream, Preston shouted over the wind. Hard work pays off, people. You grind, you shine. That is the motto. I watched the comments roll in on the side of the screen. So jealous. Goals. You guys are perfect. It was nauseating. They were selling a lie to strangers while spending stolen money. But the most dangerous thing about a lie is that it makes you feel safe. They felt untouchable up there on that balcony. They thought their secrets were left back in Atlanta, buried in paper shredders and deleted browser histories. I opened the evidence folder on my desktop. I selected 3 files. File 1 was the termination letter from Preston's former employer detailing his sexual harassment of the intern. File 2 was a PDF of his gambling losses, showing over $200,000 wasted on crypto and sports bets in the last year. File 3 was a folder of screenshots. These were the chat logs I had downloaded from his cloud backup. Explicit messages to women who were definitely not Candace. Women he met on Tinder. Women he paid. Messages where he called Candace boring and high maintenance. Messages where he laughed about spending her parents' money on hookers. I attached all the files to a single email. Subject line regarding your husband Preston. I did not write a long message. I did not need to. The evidence spoke for itself. I just wrote one line in the body of the email. He isn't rich. He isn't loyal. And he isn't yours. I moved my mouse over the send button. On the screen, Candace was laughing at something Preston said, throwing her head back in that practiced way she did to make her neck look long. She looked happy. It was a shallow, fragile happiness built on ignorance, but it was happiness nonetheless. For a split second, I hesitated. This was the nuclear option. This would not just ruin their vacation. This would ruin their marriage. This would destroy Candace's self-image. She defined herself by being the wife of a successful man. If I took that away, she would crumble. But then I remembered the lottery ticket. I remembered her voice in the recording. I disown it. It is trash. She had called me trash for 30 years. She had treated me like an accessory to her life, a prop to make her look better. She had watched Preston humiliate me and laughed. I clicked send. Whoosh! The email was gone. I sat back and watched the live stream. The delay was only about 10 seconds. On the screen, Candace was still talking. We are going to have dinner at the chef's table tonight, and I am wearing this gorgeous red dress that... She stopped. A notification chime sounded from the phone she was using to stream. It was loud and distinct. Oh, hold on, guys, she said, looking at the screen. I just got an email. It looks important. Maybe it is the itinerary for tomorrow. Do not check it, Preston yelled from the hot tub. We are on vacation, babe. Ignore work. It is from an anonymous sender, Candace said, squinting at the screen. The subject line is weird. Regarding your husband. Preston sat up in the water. His body language shifted instantly from relaxed to tense. What? Do not open that, Candace. It is probably spam, or a virus. Do not click it. But it was too late. Curiosity is a powerful force. Candace tapped the notification. Because she was live streaming from her phone, the broadcast did not cut off. It just paused the video feed for a moment while she switched apps, but the audio kept running. I heard the silence, the wind whistling. Then I heard a gasp. It was a sharp intake of air that sounded like someone had been punched in the gut. What is this? Candace whispered. I leaned closer to my speaker. What is this, Preston? She screamed, her voice cracking. The video feed came back on as she switched back to the camera app, probably by accident in her shaking panic. The camera angle was wild now, pointing up at the sky, then down at the deck. Babe, what is it? Preston asked, climbing out of the hot tub, water dripping from his swim trunks. Who is Jessica? Candace shrieked. And who is Diamond? You sent them $5,000. You told them I was a frigid bee-witch. Preston froze. He looked like a deer in headlights. Candace, that is fake. Someone hacked you. Fake, she yelled. These are screenshots from your phone, Preston. And what is this termination letter? You said you quit to start your own firm. This says you were fired for gross misconduct. Sexual misconduct. The live stream comments were going crazy now. OMG, is this real? Did he cheat? This is tea. Candace looked at the phone, realizing she was still live. She stared into the camera, her mascara already starting to smudge her face, a mask of absolute horror. The perfect facade had cracked and 3,000 people were watching the debris fall. She did not end the stream. She was too shocked to think straight. She turned the camera on Preston. Tell me this is fake, she sobbed, holding the phone up like a weapon. Tell me you did not spend my parents' retirement money on gambling. Tell me you are not broke. Preston lunged for the phone. Give me that, Candace. Stop filming. You are being hysterical. He grabbed her wrist. The camera spun violently. There was a sound of a struggle, a slap, and then the phone hit the deck with a loud clatter. The screen went black, but the audio was still clear. Get off me! Candace screamed. I hate you! I hate you! I sat in the quiet of the office and closed the tab. The show was over. Or rather, the first act was over. Julian looked at me from across the table. His face was unreadable. Remind me never to cross you, Gabrielle, he said softly. I closed my laptop and stood up. I smoothed the wrinkles on my skirt. They wanted a show, Julian, I said, picking up my purse. I just gave them one. Now, if you will excuse me, I have a locksmith to meet at 428 Maplewood Drive. I need to change the locks before the new owners take possession. And by new owners, I mean me. I walked out of the office, leaving the silence behind me. The ship was sailing into the night, carrying a cargo of misery I had carefully packed. And I was going home to sleep in the master bedroom of a house I finally owned. The captain's dinner on the Icon of the Seas is intended to be the pinnacle of elegance. It is a formal affair where men wear tuxedos and women wear evening gowns that cost more than most people's cars. The dining room is a cavernous space filled with crystal chandeliers, velvet upholstery, and the soft hum of a string quartet playing Mozart. It is designed to be a sanctuary of wealth and polite society. But at table number 4, near the center of the room, the Winters family was about to turn this sanctuary into a coliseum of trash. I did not witness this in person. I did not have to. By the time the sun rose the next morning, there were 12 different angles of the incident uploaded to TikTok and YouTube. I watched every single one of them. I watched them with a bowl of popcorn in my lap and a sense of justice so profound it felt spiritual. The video usually starts with the silence. In the footage, you can see Candace standing up. She is shaking. Her phone is clutched in her hand like a grenade. She is wearing the red silk dress she made me steam for her. It looks beautiful on her, but her face looks like a gargoyle of pure rage. Preston is sitting across from her. He is holding a fork full of lobster to his mouth. He looks confused. He is still trying to play the part of the unbothered millionaire. "Sit down, Candace," he hisses in one video. "You are making a scene." People are staring. Candace does not sit down. She looks at the phone screen, then she looks at him. Her breathing is jagged, loud enough to be picked up by the microphone of the person filming at the next table. "Who is Jessica?" she asks. Her voice is not a scream yet. It is a low, trembling whisper that carries across the room. Preston rolls his eyes. "I told you, babe, it is spam. Just delete it." "Do not lie to me," Candace screams. The sound shatters the atmosphere of the room. The string quartet stops playing mid-note. Every head in the dining room turns. "I have the screenshots, Preston. I have the messages. You sent her $5,000. You sent her the money my parents gave us for this trip. You told her I was a bore. You told her you were only with me because my family was a cash cow." Preston stands up now. His face is flushing red, matching the lobster on his plate. He tries to reach for her arm. "Candace, stop it. You are drunk. You have had too much champagne. Let us go to the room." "Do not touch me," she shrieks, pulling away. She looks down at the table. Her eyes land on his glass of red wine. A heavy, expensive Merlot. Without a second of hesitation, she grabs the glass. "You want a drink?" she yells. "Have a drink." She throws it. It is a perfect arc of crimson liquid. It splashes directly into Preston's face, soaking his white tuxedo jacket, staining his dress shirt, and dripping down onto the pristine white tablecloth. The room gasps. It is a collective intake of breath from 300 wealthy diners. Preston stands there, blinded by the wine, blinking rapidly. The shock on his face quickly morphs into fury. He wipes his eyes with a napkin, ruining it instantly. "You crazy witch," he roars. "Do not act like you are innocent. You think I wanted to cheat. I cheated because you are insufferable. You are a high-maintenance narcissist who cares more about Instagram likes than her own husband." "I am the narcissist," Candace yells back, pointing a finger at him. "You are unemployed, Preston. I saw the termination letter. You were fired for sexual harassment. You are not a businessman. You are a pervert with a gambling addiction. You have been lying to me for 6 months. You are broke. You are a loser." Preston laughs. It is a cruel, manic sound. "I am broke," he sneers. "Yeah, I am broke. But at least I admit it. Look at your parents, Candace. Look at them." He points at my father, Harold, who is sitting there frozen in horror, his mouth agape. "Your dad is the biggest fraud of them all," Preston shouts, turning to address the entire restaurant. "You think the Winters family is rich? This old man's credit card got declined 4 times at the terminal today. He had to use his pension debit card to pay for my ticket. They are drowning in debt just to keep up appearances. They are parasites. My father stands up trembling. Preston, how dare you? After everything we have done for you. Oh, shut up, Harold, Preston snaps. You did it for your ego. You wanted a son-in-law to brag about because your own son is non-existent, and your other daughter is a mousy little secretary. You used me as a prop. Well, guess what? The prop is quitting. Candace lunges across the table. She grabs a bread roll and throws it at him, then a fork, then a butter knife. You give me back my money, she screams. Give me back the $15,000. I spent it. Preston yells back, dodging a flying spoon. I put it all on black and I lost it. It is gone, Candace. Just like your looks will be in 5 years. That was the breaking point. Candace let out a primal scream and launched herself across the table. She tackled Preston, knocking over the centerpiece, the candles, and the wine bottle. They crashed onto the floor in a tangle of limbs and broken glass. It was chaos. Waiters rushed in trying to separate them. My mother Joyce was sobbing hysterically, clutching her pearls. My father was holding his chest, looking like he was having a heart attack. Get off him, someone yelled. Call security, another voice shouted. In the videos, you can see the ship's security team arriving. These are not the friendly guest service staff. These are big burly men in dark uniforms. They pull Candace off Preston. She is kicking and screaming, her red dress torn, her makeup smeared across her face like war paint. Preston is bleeding from a cut on his lip, his white tuxedo ruined. Let me go, Candace screams as 2 guards drag her toward the exit. He stole my life. He is a liar. Sir, you need to come with us too, a guard tells Preston. Preston tries to straighten his wine-soaked jacket. Do you know who I am? He demands, trying to salvage a shred of dignity. I am a VIP. I am in the owner's suite. I do not care if you are the King of England, the guard says, shoving him forward. You are going to the brig. They were marched out of the dining room. The walk of shame. 300 people watched them go. 300 people who had envied them 5 minutes ago now looked at them with a mixture of pity and disgust. My parents followed behind them, keeping their heads down, trying to make themselves invisible. But they couldn't hide. Everyone knew. Preston had announced their financial ruin to the whole ship. The facade of the wealthy Winters family had been stripped away, leaving nothing but debt and dysfunction. The video ends with the sound of the dining room slowly returning to life, the murmur of shocked whispers replacing the Mozart. I replayed that video 10 times. I focused on my father's face, the look of utter defeat. He had spent his life building a reputation, and his golden son-in-law had burned it down in 3 minutes. I focused on Candace, the way she screamed. She wasn't screaming because she was heartbroken. She was screaming because she was embarrassed. Even in her rock-bottom moment, she was worried about how she looked. I closed the browser tab and leaned back in my chair. They were confined to their cabins for the rest of the voyage. Security stationed outside the door. No alcohol, no internet, no escape from each other. 13 days. They had 13 days left at sea, trapped in a small room with the person they hated most in the world. It was a prison sentence, and they were paying $18,000 for the privilege. I took a sip of my tea. It tasted sweet. Phase 2 was complete. The emotional destruction was total. Now all that was left was the physical eviction. I picked up my phone and dialed the locksmith. I am ready, I said. Meet me at the house in an hour. We have some locks to change. Day 5 of the cruise was supposed to be the highlight of the trip. The itinerary promised a docking in Santorini, where the whitewashed buildings gleamed against the blue Aegean Sea. But for the Winters family, there was no Santorini. There was only the interior of the owner's suite, which had transformed from a palace into a high-security prison cell. Following the violent brawl at the captain's dinner, the ship's security had placed Candace and Preston under cabin arrest. My parents, Harold and Joyce, were technically free to roam the ship, but the shame was a heavier shackle than any lock. They could not walk the deck without feeling the burning stares of the other passengers. The wealthy elite they so desperately wanted to impress now viewed them as the trashy family who threw food and screamed about debt. So they sat in the suite. The air conditioning hummed a monotonous drone that did little to cool the heated tension in the room. Preston was sulking in the bedroom, staring at the wall. Candace was in the bathroom, crying over her ruined reputation and lack of Wi-Fi access. Harold sat on the velvet sofa nursing a glass of tap water, because the minibar had been locked by the crew. Joyce sat by the window, staring blankly at the ocean that stretched out endlessly in every direction. To break the suffocating silence, Harold turned on the television. The satellite signal was spotty, flickering in and out as the ship navigated the open water. He cycled through the channels, bypassing the ship's promotional loop and landing on a major American news network. It was background noise, just something to drown out the sound of Candace's muffled sobs. But then the breaking news banner flashed across the bottom of the screen in urgent crimson. Harold squinted at the TV. "Joyce, look at this," he muttered. Someone finally claimed that billion-dollar jackpot back home. Joyce did not turn around. "That is nice, Harold," she said, her voice hollow. "Maybe they can loan us some money to pay for the lawyers we are going to need when we dock." "No, look," Harold insisted, leaning forward. The reception cleared up for a moment, revealing a reporter standing in a parking lot that looked strangely familiar. The Georgia sun was beating down on the asphalt, and a crowd of excited locals waved from behind police tape. Reporting live from Atlanta, the reporter's voice crackled through the speakers. "The mystery of the nearly $1 billion Powerball winner has finally been solved. The Georgia Lottery Commission announced this morning that the single winning ticket was claimed by a blind trust named Phoenix LLC. While the identity of the individual remains a secret per state law, we have confirmed the location where the golden ticket was purchased." The camera panned to the storefront behind the reporter. It was a modest building with a peeling yellow sign and a distinctive red neon open sign that flickered even in the daylight. "Lakeside Convenience and Gas on Peach Orchard Road," the reporter announced. "The owner of the store, Mr. Patel, says the winning ticket was a quick pick, sold on the morning of Thanksgiving Day." The glass of water slipped from Harold's hand. It did not shatter on the thick carpet, but it spilled, soaking his trousers. He did not move. He did not breathe. He stared at the television screen as if he were looking at a ghost. Joyce turned around at the sound of the water spilling. "Harold, what is wrong?" she asked. "You are making a mess." Harold raised a trembling finger, pointing at the screen. "Joyce, that store." Joyce squinted at the TV. "Lakeside Convenience." "So what? It is a gas station." "It is the gas station," Harold whispered, his voice barely audible. "It is the one around the corner from the house, the one I went to on Thanksgiving morning." Joyce froze. Her mind began to race, rewinding the tape of the last week. She remembered the chaos of Thanksgiving morning. She remembered realizing they were out of ice and red wine. She remembered shouting at Harold to run out and get some before the kids arrived. "I went there for ice." Harold continued, his face draining of all color. "The line was long. I was annoyed. I bought the ice and a bottle of cheap wine. And then the clerk asked if I wanted a ticket. The jackpot was high. I had $2 in change." Joyce stood up slowly. Her legs felt weak. "No, Harold. Millions of people buy tickets. It is a coincidence." The reporter on the screen continued, delivering the final blow. "According to timestamps, the winning ticket was purchased at 9:45 a.m. on Thanksgiving Day. The winner, who has chosen to remain anonymous, has opted for the lump sum payment of $580 million. 9:45 a.m. Harold choked out. "That is exactly when I was there. I remember looking at my watch because I was afraid the turkey would burn." He looked at his hands, the hands that had held the ticket, the hands that had thrown the ticket across the dining room table. "I gave it to her," he whispered. "I gave it to Gabrielle." Joyce's hands flew to her mouth. A strangled sound escaped her throat. "No. No, you threw it at her." "We laughed at her." Preston said, "Oh my God." Preston said the odds were impossible. Harold scrambled off the sofa, falling to his knees in front of the television, as if praying to it. $580 million, Joyce. We gave her $580 million. And we gave Candace a cruise that ended in jail. The realization hit them like a physical blow. The irony was so sharp it cut bone. They had spent a fortune they did not have to impress a daughter who was a fraud, while treating the daughter who held $1 billion fortune like a servant. Phoenix, L.C. Joyce whispered. Phoenix, rising from the ashes. Gabrielle always loved that mythology. It is her. It has to be her. Panic set in. It was a cold, frantic terror. They were stuck on a ship in the middle of the ocean, broke, disgraced, and possibly about to be homeless if the rumors about Preston's debts were true. And the only lifeline they had, the only person who could save them, was the person they had insulted, humiliated, and abandoned. "Where is my phone?" Harold shouted, patting his pockets frantically. "I need to call her." He found his phone under a cushion. He dialed Gabrielle's number. His fingers were shaking so badly he misdialed twice. It rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up, Gabby. Pick up, Daddy loves you. Pick up," he muttered, sweat pouring down his forehead. The call went to voicemail. "Hi, this is Gabrielle Winters. I am currently away from my desk, stepping into a new chapter of my life. Please leave a message, although I cannot promise I will ever get back to you." The new voicemail greeting sent a chill down Harold's spine. It was not her usual professional greeting. It was final. It was a goodbye. "Call her again," Joyce screamed, grabbing her own phone. "Text her. Tell her we love her. Tell her it was a misunderstanding. Tell her the ticket was a family ticket. It was a group investment." They began to dial feverishly. The room filled with the sound of desperate keypad tapping. "Gabrielle, honey, it is. Mom." Joyce sobbed into her phone, leaving a voicemail. "We just saw the news. Oh my goodness, we are so happy for you. We always knew you were special. Listen, we are in a bit of a situation here on the ship. Call us back immediately. We are a family, Gabby. We share everything, remember." Harold was typing a text message, his thumbs flying. "Gabby, call Dad. ASAP. Emergency. We need to discuss the ticket. It was a gift, but legally it is complex. We need to protect the family assets. Do not sign anything until I get there." Candace burst out of the bedroom, her eyes red and puffy. "Why are you guys shouting? What is happening?" "Your sister," Joyce cried, turning on her. "Your sister won the lottery. The ticket Dad gave her. It was the winner. The news just confirmed it." Candace stopped crying instantly. Her jaw dropped, her eyes widened. The tears of shame evaporated, replaced instantly by a look of pure greed. "She won," Candace whispered. "That little witch won." She grabbed Harold's phone out of his hand. "Give me that." She dialed Gabrielle. When it went to voicemail, she screamed into the receiver. "Gabrielle, answer the phone. That ticket is mine. I told you to hold it for me. I never said you could keep it. You are stealing from us. Pick up the phone right now or I will sue you into the ground." Preston appeared in the doorway, looking disheveled and bruised. "Did you say money?" he asked, his eyes lighting up with a manic hope. "Did you say she has money?" "She has $500 million, Harold said, slumping onto the floor. "And she isn't answering." 79 calls. In the span of an hour, they called her 79 times. They left voicemails ranging from sickly sweet congratulations to veiled threats to sobbing pleas for help. They texted her emojis of hearts and praying hands. They sent her photos of them looking sad on the ship. But the phone just kept ringing. It rang like a knell. Miles away in a high-rise office overlooking the city, Gabrielle Winters watched her phone vibrate on the desk. She saw the names flashing on the screen. Dad, Mom, Candace, Preston. She took a sip of her chamomile tea. She reached out and pressed the volume button down, silencing the device. She did not block them. Not yet. She wanted them to ring. She wanted them to feel the silence stretching out between the ocean and the land. Let them ring, she thought, turning back to her paperwork. Let them ring until they realize that no signal can reach the bridge they burned. The penthouse was located on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building, the same tower where Julian King had his law offices. It was the highest residential unit in Atlanta, a glass box in the sky that offered a 360-degree view of the city. Down below, the cars looked like toys, and the people were invisible. It was quiet up here, the kind of expensive silence that thick glass and high altitude provide. I sat on a white Italian leather sofa that had cost more than my entire previous car. In my hand, I held a delicate porcelain cup filled with chamomile tea. The steam curled up into the air, carrying notes of honey and vanilla. On the coffee table made of reclaimed driftwood and glass, my phone was vibrating. It had been vibrating for an hour. It moved across the glass surface like a living thing dancing to the rhythm of my family's desperation. 79 missed calls. I watched the number on the screen. It was not just a statistic. It was a measurement of their fear. For 30 years I had chased them. I had chased their approval. I had chased their attention. I had chased a scrap of affection. And now, for the first time in history, the dynamic had flipped. They were chasing me. I reached out and picked up the phone. The metal was cool against my skin. The notifications were stacked like a skyscraper. Voicemail after voicemail. Text message after text message. I did not answer. Answering would give them relief. Answering would give them a target. Silence was far more terrifying. Silence allowed their imaginations to run wild. I unlocked the phone and opened the visual voicemail app. I scrolled to the bottom, starting with the first call that had come in right after the news broke. I pressed play on speakerphone. The first voice was my mother, Joyce. The background noise was chaotic. I could hear wind and the distant sound of a ship's horn. She sounded breathless, as if she had been running. "Gabrielle, baby, pick up the phone. It is Mom. We just saw the news on the television. Oh my goodness, Gabby, we are so worried about you. The reporter said the winner was anonymous, but we know it is you. We know it was that ticket Dad gave you. Listen, honey, people are going to come out of the woodwork. Bad people, people who want to use you. You need your family right now. We are the only ones you can trust. Call us back immediately. We are trying to get a flight back from Greece right now. We love you so much, sweetie. Please call Mom." I took a sip of tea. The manipulation was so thick I could almost taste it. "We love you so much." She hadn't told me she loved me since I was 12 years old. And warning me about people who want to use me was rich, coming from the woman who treated me like an unpaid maid for 2 decades. I deleted the message. I pressed play on the next one. This one was from Preston. The background noise was different. It sounded like an airport terminal, heavy echoes and the announcement of gate changes. He was not panicked like my mother. He was angry. He sounded like a manager scolding an incompetent employee. "Gabby, it is Preston. Pick up the damn phone. I tried texting you, but it is not going through. Listen to me very carefully. You are out of your depth. You have no idea how to handle that kind of liquidity. If you sign anything without me present, you are going to lose half of it in taxes and fees. I have connections in wealth management. I can set up a structure to protect the assets. Do not do anything stupid, Gabby. You know you are not good with numbers. That is my department. Just sit tight and wait for us to land. We are a team, remember. Do not let some lawyer shark take advantage of you. Call me." I laughed out loud. The sound echoed in the empty penthouse. "You are not good with numbers. I was a forensic accountant and a crisis manager. I fixed billion-dollar mistakes for a living." Preston couldn't even manage a checking account without committing a felony. I saved that message. It would be fun to play it for Julian later. I scrolled up. The messages became more frantic as time passed. There were 10 from my father, Harold. Most of them were short and breathless. "Gabrielle, call your father. Gabrielle, this is a family matter. Gabrielle, do not embarrass us." But then I reached the messages from Candace. There were 20 of them. I tapped on one from 20 minutes ago. The audio quality was sharp. She was screaming. There was no pretense of love, no fake concern, just raw, unfiltered greed. You little witch. I know you are there. I know you are listening. That ticket is mine. Dad bought it for me. I told you to hold it. I never said you could keep it. You are stealing my money. You are stealing my life. Do you hear me? You are a thief. When I get back to Atlanta, I am going to drag you to court. I am going to ruin you. Pick up the phone, you miserable, ungrateful parasite. That is my money. Mine. I let the venom wash over me. It did not sting. It felt validating. This was who she really was. This was the sister who had smiled while I steamed her dresses. This was the sister who had laughed when I was given a $2 gift. She did not want a sister. She wanted a bank account. I closed my eyes and pictured where they were right now. They would be on an emergency flight back from Athens. They probably had to pay a fortune for last-minute tickets. And since Preston's cards were frozen and my father was tapped out, they were likely squeezed into economy class. Middle seats, no legroom, surrounded by crying babies and the smell of stale coffee. I imagined Candace trying to sleep in an upright seat, her neck cramping, her expensive extensions tangled. I imagined Preston sweating in his linen suit, unable to buy a cocktail because he had no money. I imagined my parents staring at the seat back in front of them, wondering how their golden life had turned into lead so quickly. They were rushing back to control me. They were rushing back to claim what they believed was theirs. But they were too late. I stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. The city of Atlanta lay spread out below me, a grid of golden lights. Somewhere down there in the dark patches was the house on Maplewood Drive. I had already sent the locksmith. The locks were changed, the alarm code was updated. The deed was recorded in the name of Phoenix LLC. When they landed in 10 hours, they would not be coming home to a warm bed. They would be coming home to a fortress that no longer recognized their keys. I looked at my phone again. Another call was coming in. It was my father again. I let it ring. I imagined him in the airport terminal, holding the phone to his ear, his hand shaking, his face pale. I imagined the hope draining out of him with every ring that went unanswered. Ring. Maybe she is asleep. Ring. Maybe she lost her phone. Ring. Maybe she is waiting for us. No, Dad, I am not waiting. I am watching. I pressed the side button on my phone, silencing the ringer. The room returned to its blissful, expensive quiet. I finished my tea. It was time to get some sleep. I had a busy day tomorrow. I had a meeting with the foreclosure team, and I wanted to be well rested when I evicted my family from their lives. I walked to the master bedroom. The bed was a California king with sheets made of Egyptian cotton. I climbed in and pulled the duvet up to my chin. For the first time in 30 years, I did not worry about what tomorrow would bring. I knew exactly what it would bring. Justice. And 99 problems, but money wasn't one. The taxi ride from the airport was the longest 40 minutes of their lives. My parents, Harold and Joyce, along with Candace and Preston, sat in silence, squeezed into a single Uber XL because Preston's credit cards were still frozen and my father had barely enough cash left to cover the fare. The air in the car smelled of stale fast food and defeat. They had spent 13 hours in economy class flying back from Athens, wedged into middle seats, with no legroom, and crying babies on all sides. Their clothes were wrinkled, their eyes were red-rimmed from lack of sleep, and their spirits were crushed. When the car finally turned onto Maplewood Drive, a collective sigh of relief washed over them. They were home. They were finally safe. The nightmare of the cruise ship, the shame of the public fight, and the terror of the financial collapse could be dealt with tomorrow. Tonight, they just wanted to sleep in their own beds. The taxi idled at the curb while they unloaded their heavy suitcases. My father tipped the driver the last $5 in his wallet and watched the taillights disappear down the dark street. The silence of the suburbs wrapped around them. It was 2 a.m. The neighborhood was asleep. Thank God, Joyce whispered, dragging her suitcase up the driveway. I just want to take a hot bath and forget this entire week ever happened. Candace was shivering, hugging her arms around herself. I need Wi-Fi, she muttered. I need to delete those videos off the internet before anyone else sees them. Preston walked ahead of them. His shoulders slumped, but his arrogance slowly returning now that he was back on familiar turf. Don't worry, babe, he said. We will fix it. I will call my lawyer in the morning and we will sue the cruise line for defamation. And then we will deal with your sister. They reached the front porch. The porch light was off, which was strange because my mother always left it on a timer. The house loomed dark and silent above them, like a sleeping beast. Harold fished his keys out of his pocket. The familiar jingle sounded loud in the quiet night. He stepped up to the massive oak double doors, the symbol of his status in the community. He jammed the key into the lock, expecting the smooth click he had felt every day for 30 years. Clink! The key stopped. It did not turn. Harold frowned. He wiggled it. He pulled it out and tried again, pushing harder. What is wrong? Harold Joyce asked, standing behind him, shivering. Open the door. It is freezing out here. It is stuck. Harold grunted, twisting the key until the metal groaned. It won't turn. The lock is stiff. Preston sighed loudly. Move over, Harold. Let a man handle it. You are probably using the wrong key in your senility. Preston stepped up and grabbed the keys. He selected the large brass one and shoved it into the keyhole. He turned it with force. Nothing. It was like trying to open a bank vault with a toothpick. Then Preston looked closer at the hardware. He pulled his phone out and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the lock mechanism. This isn't your lock, Preston said, his voice confused. This is new. It is a smart lock. It is biometric. What are you talking about? Joyce asked, crowding in. We didn't change the locks. That was when the flashlight beam drifted upward. It moved past the shiny new handle and landed on the center of the door, right at eye level. There was a sticker there, a large, aggressive square of red and white vinyl that had not been there a week ago. The light illuminated the text in harsh clarity. Property of Phoenix, LLC. No trespassing. This property has been foreclosed and is under new management. For access, contact the asset manager. Harold stared at the sticker. He read the words once, then twice. His brain refused to process them. Foreclosed, Phoenix LLC, L. Phoenix, Joyce whispered. The color drained from her face, making her look ghostly in the flashlight beam. That is the trust. The lottery trust. Gabrielle. Candace gasped. She did this. That little witch locked us out of our own house. Harold began to pound on the door. Gabrielle, he shouted, his voice cracking. I know you are in there. Open this door immediately. This is my house. You cannot do this. Silence. The house did not answer. Preston stepped back, looking at the dark windows. She is not here, Harold. She probably changed the locks while we were in the air just to be spiteful. But she forgot one thing. I live here too. And I have rights. He walked over to the side of the porch where a large decorative planter stood. He reached down and grabbed a heavy river stone from the base of the plant. What are you doing? Joyce cried. I am getting us inside, Preston growled. It is our house. You cannot trespass in your own home. If she wants to play games, we will play games. He walked to the side window, the one next to the dining room. He pulled his arm back and hurled the stone. Crash! The sound of shattering glass tore through the night like a gunshot. Shards rained down onto the hardwood floor inside. Preston reached through the jagged hole, unlocked the latch, and shoved the window up. Come on, he said, climbing through. We are getting in. One by one, they scrambled through the broken window. It was undignified. Harold tore his suit pants. Joyce scraped her knee. But they were desperate. They stood in the dark dining room, breathing heavy. The air inside felt cold, colder than usual. See, Preston said, brushing glass off his sleeves. We are in. Now let us figure out how to turn the alarm off before it... He did not finish the sentence. Suddenly, the house exploded with sound. It was not the standard beep of a home security system. It was a high-decibel military-grade siren that Gabrielle had installed along with the new locks. It was a sound designed to disorient and terrify. It pulsed through the walls, shaking the floorboards. Whoop! Whoop! Intruder alert! Police have been dispatched. Intruder alert! Turn it off! Harold screamed, covering his ears. Punch in the code! Joyce ran to the keypad by the front door. Her shaking fingers punched in her birthday. 4265. Error. Access denied. She tried again. 1234. Error. Access denied. The siren got louder. Lights began to strobe. The smart home system turned all the lights in the house on and off in a chaotic pattern, turning the living room into a disorienting nightmare. Preston ran to the kitchen to try the back door panel, but it was dead. And then they saw the lights outside, blue and red, flashing against the living room curtains. They had arrived in less than 2 minutes. The station was only 4 blocks away, and a priority alarm from a high-value property brought them running. This is the police. Come out with your hands up. The amplified voice boomed from the front yard, cutting through the siren. Harold looked at Joyce. Terror was etched into every line of his face. He had never had a run-in with the law in his life. He was a deacon at his church. He was a respected member of the community. We have to go out, Harold said, or they will come in with guns. They opened the front door, the one they couldn't unlock from the outside but could open from the inside. 3 police cruisers were parked on the lawn. 4 officers stood behind their doors, guns drawn, and pointed directly at the Winters family. Hands in the air. Walk slowly off the porch. Officer. Please, Harold yelled, raising his trembling hands. I am the owner, Harold Winters. This is my house. My alarm is malfunctioning. The lead officer, a stern man with a buzz cut, did not lower his weapon. Walk off the porch, sir. Now. They shuffled down the steps, the strobe lights painting them in alternating shades of red and blue. They were herded onto the grass wet with dew. Officer. Listen to me, Preston said, trying to use his sales voice. My name is Preston Miller. I live here. My key didn't work, so we had to break a window. It is a misunderstanding. The officer kept one hand on his holster and reached for his radio with the other. Dispatch verify owner of 428 Maplewood Drive. A crackle of static. Owner listed as Phoenix Limited Liability Company. Property status foreclosed and vacant. No authorized residents. The officer looked at Preston with cold, hard eyes. Sir, the owner is a corporation. You are trespassing on commercial property, and breaking and entering is a felony. But my daughter owns that company, Joyce sobbed. It is a family trust. Does she know you are here? The officer asked. Well, no, Joyce stammered. We just got back from vacation. So you broke into a house you do not own without the owner's permission, the officer summarized. He gestured to his partners. Get them off the property. If they have proof of residency, they can show it to a judge on Monday. Tonight, the asset manager has requested 0 tolerance for trespassers. But where do we go? Candace wailed. Our luggage is here. We have nowhere to go. The officer pointed to the sidewalk. Public property starts at the curb, ma'am. You can stand there, but you cannot stay on this lawn. Move. Humiliation is a physical weight. They felt it pressing down on their shoulders as they dragged their heavy suitcases down the driveway under the watchful eyes of the police. Neighbors were waking up. Curtains were twitching. Lights were turning on in the houses across the street. People were watching the respectable Winters family being evicted like common criminals. They reached the sidewalk. The police watched them until they were fully off the grass. Have a good night, folks, the officer said. And do not try to come back. We will be patrolling. The cruisers pulled away, leaving them in the darkness. They stood there. 4 people clustered around a pile of Louis Vuitton luggage on a concrete slab. The house they had lived in for 30 years stood 10 yards away, warm and inviting, but utterly inaccessible. Harold sat down on his suitcase. He put his head in his hands and began to weep. Not quiet, dignified crying, but loud, racking sobs of a man who has lost everything. Joyce stood staring at the broken window. She knew, she whispered. She knew we were coming home tonight. She timed it. Preston kicked the curb. I am going to kill her, he muttered. I am going to kill her. Candace wrapped her coat tighter around herself. Her teeth were chattering. You can't kill her, Preston, she said, her voice devoid of hope. She is a ghost, and we are the ones who are dead. They sat there on the curb as the wind picked up, blowing dead leaves around their expensive shoes, waiting for a sunrise that would bring no relief, only more reckoning. The conference room on the 45th floor of the Sovereign Building was a cathedral of glass and steel designed to intimidate. The air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, a stark contrast to the humid Atlanta heat outside. I sat at the head of the massive obsidian conference table, my hands folded calmly in front of me. To my right sat Julian King, looking sharp and predatory in a navy blue suit. On the table between us sat a single digital audio recorder and a stack of manila folders. We did not have to wait long. I had instructed the building security to let them up. I wanted this meeting. I needed this closure. The double doors burst open. My family spilled into the room, and the smell of desperation entered with them. They looked nothing like the arrogant royalty that had boarded the cruise ship 5 days ago. They were disheveled. My father Harold was wearing the same suit he had worn on the plane, but it was wrinkled and stained with sweat. My mother Joyce looked 10 years older, her eyes puffy from crying. Preston was unshaven, his eyes darting around the room like a trapped rat. And Candace, my beautiful golden sister, looked like a woman on the verge of a psychotic break. Her hair was messy and she was wearing a tracksuit she must have bought at an airport gift shop. They stopped when they saw me. For a moment, the luxury of the room silenced them. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city they thought they owned, but now had no place in. Then the shock wore off, and the rage set in. Candace lunged forward, her hands clawing at the air. You thief, she screamed. You dirty, lying thief. That money is mine. Dad bought that ticket for me. You were just holding it. Preston grabbed her arm, holding her back not to protect me, but because Julian had stood up and he looked ready to call security. Sit down, Julian ordered, his voice cutting through the hysteria like a whip. Or I will have you removed and arrested for harassment. They collapsed into the leather chairs on the opposite side of the table. The distance between us felt like an ocean. Gabrielle, my father started, his voice trembling with a mix of anger and pleading. How could you do this? We slept on the street last night. Your mother slept on a suitcase. We are your family. You locked us out, Candace spat, interrupting him. You changed the locks on our house. You have no right. That is our home. I stayed silent. I let them vent. I let them pour out every ounce of their entitlement. Preston leaned forward, trying to compose himself. Look, Gabby, let us be adults here. We know you won. Congratulations. Really. But you and I both know that ticket was a group investment. Harold bought it with family funds. That makes it community property. Now we are willing to be generous. We will settle for a 50-50 split. You keep half, we take half. And we will forget this whole ugly lockout incident ever happened. I looked at Preston, the man who had mocked me in my own kitchen, the man who had called me a spinster. Is that so? I asked, my voice soft. 50-50. My mother nodded eagerly, wiping her eyes. Yes, baby. That is fair. We are a family. We share everything. We raised you, Gabrielle. We paid for your college. We put a roof over your head. You owe us. You cannot just take $1 billion and run. It is immoral. Candace slammed her hand on the table. It is not about morals, Mom. It is about the law. That ticket was a gift. But it was a conditional gift. I can testify that I gave it to her to hold for safekeeping. Any judge will see that. If you do not give me my share, Gabrielle, I will sue you for every single penny. I will tie this money up in court for 20 years. You will never spend a dime of it. I looked at them. 4 people who had spent a lifetime making me feel small. They were rewriting history right in front of my eyes. They truly believed their own lies. They believed they deserved my fortune because they felt they were superior to me. I reached out and touched the digital recorder. You are right, Candace, I said. The law cares about intent. It cares about who owns the asset. And it cares about what was said when the asset was transferred. I looked at Julian. He nodded. I pressed the play button. The sound quality was crystal clear, amplified by the conference room speakers. It was the recording from the bedroom, the recording from the day I packed their bags. My voice filled the room. Chi Candace kai ve bo me cho hom qua em tra lai nye. Lo trung ti sao. Then Preston's voice loud and arrogant. Chú lấy mà mua bánh mì. Bọn tao không cần vận may rẻ tiền của mày. The blood drained from Preston's face. He sank back into his chair, his mouth opening and closing wordlessly. Then Candace's voice shrill and dismissive. Nó là của mày, tao không liên quan. I paused the recording. I looked at Candace. She was frozen. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the recorder as if it were a bomb. I pressed play again. I disown it. I reject it. It is 100% yours. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush bones. The echo of Candace's voice saying, "It is 100% yours," seemed to bounce off the glass walls. "That is a verbal disclaimer," I said, my voice steady. In the state of Georgia, a clear rejection of a gift transfers full ownership to the recipient. You did not just give it to me, Candace. You rejected it. You called it trash. You said you did not want a single cent. That was illegal, Candace whispered, her voice shaking. You recorded us without our consent. Actually, Julian interjected, leaning forward. Georgia is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it is being recorded, it is perfectly admissible in court. Gabrielle knew. The recording is legal. And it is devastating. My mother put her head in her hands and began to sob. Not the fake tears she used to manipulate my father, but real tears of ruin. Gabrielle, please, she wept. We made a mistake. We were stressed. We didn't mean it. You are our daughter. You cannot leave us with nothing. We have no money. Preston lost everything. We have nowhere to go. I looked at my mother. I felt a twinge of the old guilt, the old desire to please her. But then I remembered the folding table. I remembered the years of neglect. I remembered that they only wanted me now because I was a paycheck. You do not have nothing, Mom, I said. You have each other. You have your golden child, Candace. You have your genius son-in-law, Preston. Surely they can take care of you. I picked up the manila folder and slid it across the table to my father. And as for having nowhere to go, I am afraid that is accurate. My father opened the folder. His hands were shaking so hard the papers rattled. He looked at the document on top. It was a notice to quit. What is this? He whispered. Julian answered, That is a formal notice from the new owner of 428 Maplewood Drive. New owner? My father stammered. But the bank? The bank sold the debt, Julian explained. Your mortgage was non-performing, Harold. You hadn't paid the principal in months. The bank sold the note to a distressed asset firm yesterday morning. That firm is Phoenix LLC. My father looked up at me. His eyes were filled with betrayal. You bought my house. I bought my house, I corrected him. I bought the house that I paid to refinance 3 years ago. The house where I was treated like a servant. Yes, I bought it. And as the owner, I am accelerating the foreclosure process. I leaned forward, looking into my father's eyes. You are trespassing on my property. But because I am generous, I am giving you 48 hours. You have 2 days to remove your personal belongings. Anything left in the house after 48 hours will be considered abandoned property and will be hauled away to the dump. The dump, Candace screamed, jumping up. My clothes are in there, my jewelry. You cannot throw my life in the trash. You called my future trash, I said, cold as ice. Now I am just returning the favor. Preston tried one last time. Gabby, listen, we can work this out. I can help you manage the money. We can turn this into a dynasty. Do not throw away your family for money. I stood up. The meeting was over. I did not throw away my family. Preston, I said, walking toward the door. I threw away the parasites that were feeding on me. There is a difference. I stopped at the door and looked back at them one last time. They sat around the table, a portrait of ruined arrogance. They had lost the money, they had lost the house, they had lost their reputation, and most importantly, they had lost their victim. Julian will see you out, I said. Do not be late moving out. My contractors start renovation on Monday. I am turning Candace's bedroom into a gym. I walked out of the conference room and let the heavy door click shut behind me. I heard Candace start screaming again, but the sound was muffled. It sounded far away, like a memory of a bad dream that was finally fading in the morning light. I walked down the hall toward the elevator, my heels clicking a rhythm of freedom on the marble floor. I pressed the button for the lobby. I was going to lunch. And for the first time in my life, I was going to order exactly what I wanted. The air over Lake Como tastes different than the air in Atlanta. It tastes like ancient money and absolute freedom. I stood on the limestone terrace of my new villa, watching the sun dip behind the Italian Alps, turning the water of the lake into a sheet of hammered gold. It was quiet here, the kind of quiet that costs $50,000 a week to rent, but I had bought the property outright. Down below, a wooden Riva boat cut through the water, leaving a white wake that disappeared as quickly as it formed. It reminded me of my family. They had made a lot of noise and waves, but in the end, they had vanished, leaving the surface of my life perfectly smooth. It had been 3 months since the meeting in the glass conference room. 3 months since I evicted the people who raised me from the house I owned. 3 months since I severed the branch of the family tree that was poisoning the roots. I took a sip of a vintage Barolo and thought about what was happening 4,000 miles away in Georgia. I did not need to guess. My lawyer Julian sent me weekly updates. He called it the Schadenfreude report. Today was sentencing day for Preston. At this very moment, he was likely standing before a Fulton County judge in an orange jumpsuit that clashed horribly with his complexion. The forensic audit I had provided to the district attorney was devastating. Identity theft, credit card fraud, wire fraud, and grand larceny for stealing my parents' retirement funds. Julian told me Preston's defense attorney had tried to plead insanity, claiming a gambling addiction made him do it. The judge had laughed. Preston was looking at 5 to 7 years in a federal penitentiary. The golden boy was going to rust behind bars, and Candace, my beautiful sister, who had once told me I was destined to be a servant. She was currently working the dinner shift at a 24-hour diner off the interstate. Her divorce from Preston had left her with nothing but debt since she had signed countless loan documents without reading them. She had no degree because she had dropped out of college to marry a rich man. Now she was wearing a polyester uniform that smelled like grease and stale coffee. Julian told me she had been fired from her first job at a boutique for being rude to customers. Now she had to smile for tips. She had to serve people just like I had served her for 30 years. I wondered if her feet hurt. I hoped they did. And my parents, Harold and Joyce. They were settling into their new reality in a 1-bedroom walk-up apartment on the south side of the city. It was all they could afford on their basic Social Security checks now that their savings were gone and their credit was ruined by the foreclosure. There was no more country club, no more trips to Europe, no more hosting Thanksgiving dinners to show off their success. They spent their days arguing over whose fault it was. My mother blamed my father for buying the ticket. My father blamed my mother for coddling Preston. They were trapped in a prison of their own, surrounded by cheap furniture and regret. I looked down at the marble table in front of me. On it sat a single heavy cream envelope and my checkbook. I picked up my fountain pen. The ink was black and permanent. I opened the checkbook. I wrote out the date. I wrote out the names Harold and Joyce Winters, and then I wrote the amount, $2.00. It was the exact cost of the Powerball ticket. It was the exact value they had placed on my dignity that Thanksgiving. I tore the check out with a satisfying rip. I slipped it into the card. I had written a short note inside. Here is the return on your initial investment. The capital has been repaid. We are completely even. Do not contact me again. I sealed the envelope. I did not feel hate anymore. Hate takes energy. Hate requires you to care. I felt nothing. It was a beautiful, empty neutrality. I was not their daughter anymore. I was just a stranger who had won a game they did not know they were playing. I picked up the envelope and walked to the edge of the terrace. I would mail it tomorrow when I went into the village to buy fresh bread and flowers. Behind me, the glass door of the villa slid open. Gabby, are you coming inside? Marco is opening the champagne, and Elena made that risotto you love. I turned around. Standing in the doorway were my friends. Not the people I was related to by blood, but the family I had chosen. Julian was there, having flown in for the weekend, and Marco, a local artist I had met who didn't know I was a billionaire and didn't care. They looked at me with warmth, with respect, with love that didn't come with a price tag. I am coming, I said. I placed the envelope on the table. A gust of wind from the Alps fluttered the paper, but it did not blow away. It stayed there, a tombstone for a past life. I walked toward the warm yellow light spilling out from the villa. I crossed the threshold and slid the glass door shut behind me, locking out the cold and the dark. I did not look back at the view. I did not look back at America. I just smiled and walked into the room where the laughter was real. This story serves as a powerful reminder that your value is never determined by how others treat you, even if those people are your family. Gabrielle's journey proves that toxic loyalty is a trap, and that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who consistently diminish your worth. It teaches us that true family is built on respect and love, not on obligation or DNA. We learn that success is the best revenge, but peace is the ultimate prize. Gabrielle did not just win a lottery, she won her freedom by realizing that she didn't need their validation to be whole. If this story resonated with you, and you believe that everyone deserves to be respected, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice and resilience. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with a family member to protect your own peace? I would love to hear your experiences in the comments below. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that they are strong enough to write their own ending. Thank you for watching, and remember, your life is your own jackpot, so do not let anyone else spend it.